One day, a mother and daughter went to see a rental house. A man greeted them. They followed him onto a secluded dirt path, believing it was part of the property tour. However, everything changed once they entered a small shed concealed among the trees. There was shouting, violence, and then silence. Only one of them returned. What truly occurred in the woods that day? Gabriela Barrios was born on May 25, 1991, in Quetzaltenango, Guatemala. This beautiful city in the highlands is known for its traditions and lively culture. Gabriela She lived in a home where learning was highly valued. Gabriela, fueled by curiosity and a desire to create, studied architecture in college. After graduating, she co-founded her own architecture firm with a friend. But her interests extended beyond architecture. She also studied culinary arts, attended cultural events, and published a book of poetry named Versos en Complicidad. Additionally, she hosted a radio show on a Christian station and recorded a music album with her father. Known for her tenacity, imagination, and joy, Gabriela constantly sought ways to express her diverse passions. In 2014, she volunteered at a charity event for children with cancer and met Eric Lancerio. They felt an instant connection, which quickly developed into a loving relationship. They shared their hopes for the future, and life seemed full of promise. Gabriela's career and personal life were going well, but her family was dealing with a difficult situation. Her father was diagnosed with cancer. This was very upsetting news, but Gabriela remained resilient. After her father's surgery, the family decided to renovate their house to make his recovery easier. While the renovations were happening, they needed a temporary place to live, and Gabriela took the lead in finding one. On Friday, the 3rd of February, 2017, she found a classified ad that caught her attention. A house for rent just 8 miles away. She called the number. A man answered, claiming to be the property owner. They spoke briefly, then arranged a meeting for the next morning. On Saturday, the 4th of February, Gabriela and her mother, Orba Lely Lopez, went to see the house. Gabriela sent videos of the house to the family group chat. After that, no one heard from them. They didn't come home, missed the family lunch, and didn't answer calls or messages. This was unusual behavior. As time went on, their loved ones became increasingly worried. Fear turned to horror that night. Lely was found barely alive. She had dragged herself to the edge of a river, bruised, bleeding, and pleading for help. Locals rushed her to the hospital. Though she was in critical condition, Lely remained conscious, and from her hospital bed, her face swollen and her body battered. Émerson Marroquín was not a stranger to the city. Born in Quetzaltenango on April 2, 1977, he was a well-known former professional football player and the son of a respected local sports personality. Like his father, Émerson became famous playing for one of the region's top teams. He was known for his aggressive playing style and fierce competitiveness, but he also frequently courted controversy. He was a player who both won awards and stirred up trouble. After retiring from professional football, Émerson disappeared from public view. He went from being a celebrated athlete in packed stadiums to living a more private life. Aside from his nostalgic social media posts, he was no longer in the news. He often shared old photos of his career, including images of trophies and memorable moments. Fans and former teammates filled the comment sections with praise and fond memories, unaware of the troubles he was now facing. While the internet focused on Émerson's athletic achievements, a serious situation was developing in Quetzaltenango. Gabriela was still missing, and her injured mother was in the hospital. Gabriela's family and friends began searching for her. Her boyfriend, Eric Lancerio, searched the riverbank where Lely had been discovered, hoping to find some information. At the same time, he officially reported Gabriela's disappearance to the police and the public prosecutor. The response was quick and terrible. On Sunday, the 5th of February, the day after the attack, and volunteer firefighters made a disturbing find. The river's water level had fallen, revealing Gabriela's body in the water. She had clearly fought back, as evidenced by the deep cuts on her abdomen, chest, and neck. One firefighter who helped recover the body explained that they only found her because the lower water level exposed her. Later that day, Eric faced the agonizing task of identifying Gabriela's body. The scene was heartbreaking. Her legs were severely bruised. Her skin was covered in scratches, and her face was badly disfigured. The National Institute of Forensic Sciences determined that Gabriela died from a fatal wound to her carotid artery and a puncture wound to her heart. She bled to death internally due to these injuries. The autopsy also showed she had a broken nose and other injuries from being hit with a blunt object, indicating extreme violence. The day of her burial at the public cemetery was filled with immense sorrow. Her family, friends, and the whole community deeply mourned her passing, remembering her generosity. Despite the grief, everyone strongly demanded justice for her. They believed they knew who was to blame. However, the accused, Émerson Marroquín, was a powerful figure, and they feared his reputation, influence, and history might obstruct the investigation. Despite this, the investigation continued. A few days after Gabriela's death, a deputy commissioner of the Guatemala National Civil Police publicly confirmed that they had gathered enough evidence to identify the perpetrator of both the murder and the attempted murder, but Émerson had already disappeared. His house, the same one Gabriela and her mother had gone to look at for a rental, it was immediately placed under surveillance. While investigators pieced together what had happened, one piece of evidence stood out: a video captured by Gabriela on her phone the day of the visit. In it, the man who greeted them, the man who claimed to be the property owner, was clearly visible. That man was Émerson. Thanks to that video and to the haunting but lucid testimony of Lely, investigators reconstructed the timeline. Gabriela and her mother were expecting a normal visit when they arrived at the property. Émerson said he was renting. Émerson met them at the house, but immediately told them they couldn't go inside because the current tenants hadn't moved out yet. He promised they would be leaving shortly, and then suggested an alternative. He offered to show them a natural spring in a nearby wooded area, which he said was a nice feature of the property. Gabriela and her mother trusted him and agreed, so they followed him down a dirt path to a small library. Simple building. What followed would defy comprehension. Once inside the secluded space, Émerson's demeanor shifted without warning. He turned violent, demanding their belongings while shouting aggressively. Then, he struck Gabriela in the face with his fist, again and again. When Lely tried to intervene, he attacked her too. They handed over everything they had, hoping that would be enough. But it wasn't. He had lost all control. Émerson grabbed a makeshift weapon, a wooden object embedded with a nail, and launched into a frenzied assault. The violence was merciless. As Lely would later recount, he beat them with brutal force. The sound of the blows echoed through the trees, then silence. Émerson lingered, staring at the two women lying motionless on the ground, believing he had killed them both. He covered their bodies with branches and debris. He left the scene, thinking the nightmare was over. But it wasn't. Lely was still alive, wounded and barely breathing. She lay in silence for what felt like an eternity, terrified that Émerson would return. When she finally realized he was gone, she turned to her daughter, whispering her name, pleading for a response. Gabriela didn't move. Lely shook her, pinched her, but nothing. Her daughter was already gone. Lely faced an impossible decision: stay and die, or leave her daughter's body behind to survive. Her husband was recovering from surgery, and her son was waiting at home. Gathering her remaining strength, despite her injuries and grief, she went to the river and let the current take her. She managed to grab onto a rock and get out of the water. She crawled to a road where drivers found her and called for help. Later, from the hospital, where she was being treated for broken ribs, she gave a statement. Her account matched the findings of Gabriela's autopsy. Lely's bravery saved her, but getting justice for Gabriela remained uncertain. Finding Émerson became harder as time passed, and authorities struggled to find him. An arrest warrant wasn't issued until the 20th of March. More than a month after the crime, he was wanted for femicide, attempted femicide, and aggravated robbery. Gabriela's family and friends kept pushing for justice. They marched, put up posters of Émerson, and pressured the authorities to keep investigating. A support organization for women affected by violence joined the case after a court hearing to provide the Barrios family with legal aid. Meanwhile, rumors swirled in the media. Some speculated Émerson had tried to initiate a romantic relationship with Gabriela, and her rejection might have triggered the violence. But the foundation quickly dismissed those claims. She was there to rent a house. A criminologist consulted by the press offered another theory. He suggested the crime was likely not premeditated, but rather a volatile reaction, possibly triggered by a need for money or the influence of substances. The randomness of the assault, combined with the excessive force, indicated a disturbed mental state rather than a cold, calculated plan. 3 months after Gabriela's murder, with her killer still at large, a memorial service was held to remember her. Friends, family, and community members gathered to ensure her memory lived on. In a moving tribute, Gabriela's boyfriend, Eric Lancerio, attended, dressed as a clown, a symbolic act of grief and protest. Through his tears, he conveyed a clear message. Gabriela had aspirations and a valuable life that was unjustly taken. He highlighted the injustice of her killer remaining free. The demand for answers grew beyond her immediate circle. Organizations and advocacy groups joined in, pressing authorities to ensure Gabriela's case wouldn't be ignored. Journalists and broadcasters also amplified the call for justice, emphasizing Gabriela's work as a radio host and advocating for safer conditions for media workers in Guatemala. Then came the news. Authorities confirmed that Émerson Marroquín had fled the country. Declared a fugitive, Interpol issued a red alert. His face began circulating internationally, alongside pleas for cooperation in capturing the man suspected of femicide and attempted murder. In September 2017, after months of silence, Guatemalan officials confirmed the breakthrough everyone had been hoping for. Émerson Marroquín had been captured. In truth, his arrest had occurred a month earlier in the United States. In his attempt to disappear, he had drastically altered his appearance and pretended to be a Mexican citizen. But it wasn't enough. Through coordinated efforts between U.S. authorities, Guatemala's justice system, and Interpol, his identity was confirmed using biometric and fingerprint analysis. In November, Émerson was deported in handcuffs and under guard. He was taken off the plane and detained. The legal case against him restarted. When reporters questioned him, Émerson was evasive, giving unclear answers. When asked if he actually rented the property connected to the crimes, he gave a vague answer, saying he had many business interests. He denied any guilt, but said he was prepared to go to court. A month after a 9-hour hearing, a judge ordered Émerson to stay in jail while awaiting trial. He was officially charged with murdering Gabriela Barrios and attempting to murder Orba Lely Lopez. However, the judge dismissed the charge of aggravated robbery, concluding that Émerson likely got rid of Gabriela and her mother's belongings to hide evidence, not to steal them. Despite this, the case moved slowly, and years passed. The trial finally started in July 2022, more than 5 years after the crime. Because the case was so sensitive and received so much media attention, much of the trial was held privately. The defense tried to cast doubt on Lely's testimony. They argued that it was not possible for her to have escaped through the river and reached the road given her injuries. This argument was unsuccessful. Lely maintained her story, describing how she had to lie still for half an hour, pretending to be dead. Before crawling away to safety, the emergency workers who found her confirmed that she had severe injuries, including bruises, wounds, and broken bones, which contradicted the defense's attempt to minimize the attack. The prosecution presented strong evidence against Émerson Marroquín, including Data placing Gabriela, Lely, and Émerson together at the crime scene, a phone call from Gabriela to Émerson the day before, and Émerson's DNA found at the crime scene. Based on this evidence, the court found Émerson Marroquín guilty. He received a sentence of 50 years for Gabriela Barrios' murder and an additional 16 years and 8 months for the attempted murder of Orba Lely Lopez, totaling 66 years and 8 months in prison. After the verdict, Gabriela's brother, his voice breaking, declared outside the courthouse that he could now tell his sister that justice had been done and that her death had not been in vain. The family thanked God first, and then the authorities who never gave up. The road had been difficult. Emerson had tried every legal tactic to delay the sentence, but the family never lost faith. He Survivors Foundation, which had supported Gabriela's family from the beginning, hailed the ruling as a victory, not just for one family, but for all women. They vowed to seek additional reparations and institutional protection measures to prevent tragedies like this from happening again. When the police arrived at the house, they immediately sensed something was wrong. There were no broken windows or signs of forced entry. A quiet bedroom with a man lying on the floor in his pajamas. His glasses sat neatly on the nightstand. A kitchen knife and a cricket bat were nearby, and the door was tied shut with a bathrobe belt. The oddest detail was that his girlfriend, Jane Andrews, was missing. What happened that night, and where could Jane be? Jane Dawn Elizabeth Andrews was born on April 1st, 1967 in Cleethorpes, Lincolnshire, England. Due to financial difficulties, her family had to move to Grimsby, which was not their preferred choice. Her father, a joiner, had trouble finding steady work and often switched between temporary jobs, leaving the family without consistent support. Jane's mother managed the household by first working in social care and later as a teaching assistant. Although her job provided a stable income, it was not sufficient to meet their needs. Eventually, the family was forced to move into a much smaller home that lacked a bathroom, having only an outdoor toilet. Their situation was extremely challenging. They frequently searched the house for spare coins to buy a loaf of bread. Despite their struggles, they kept their difficulties to themselves, and their relatives were unaware of how tough their circumstances truly were. Jane was a bright and curious child. Her teachers recognized her potential. However, during her teenage years, she faced mental health challenges, including depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. As a result, her grades fell, and she started skipping school. When her mother discovered this, Jane felt ashamed. She didn't intend to rebel, but simply couldn't handle her situation. She began to feel hopeless and as though her life lacked purpose. Eventually, in a moment of profound despair, Jane tried to take her own life by ingesting a large number of pills. Although she survived, her mental health continued to worsen. As Jane got older, she found herself turning to brief relationships for comfort. At 17, she became pregnant, but realized that the father wasn't committed, and she felt unprepared to raise a child on her own. So, she made the tough decision to terminate the pregnancy. Initially, it seemed like the right choice, but it left her with lingering feelings of regret. To move forward, she enrolled in a fashion design program in high school. After graduating, she started working as a designer for children's clothing at a British retail chain. Although the job wasn't glamorous, it was a step in the right direction. However, she still lived with her parents in Grimsby, and she was unhappy there. Jane yearned for a better life. She spent hours perusing fashion magazines, envisioning herself in those stunning outfits adorned with designer jewelry. She wasn't just dreaming of success. She was truly desperate for a change and a way to escape. In 1988, 21-year-old Jane saw a job advertisement in a magazine. A busy mother needed a dresser to assist her with wardrobe and styling. Assuming the mother was wealthy, Jane applied, unaware that this would lead her to encounter royalty. 6 months later, Jane was invited for an interview and found herself meeting Sarah, the Duchess of York and wife of Prince Andrew. They connected well, and within a week, Jane received a life-changing letter confirming she got the job. Jane's journey took her from Grimsby to Buckingham Palace, entering a new world. Her starting salary was £17,000 a year, modest for royal standards. But what truly mattered to Jane was the privilege of access. She traveled worldwide with Sarah, mingled with aristocrats, and rapidly began to transform herself. She took elocution lessons to soften her northern accent and adopted new clothes, mannerisms, and even a different identity. She had a goal. Instead of just working for the wealthy, she wanted to become wealthy herself. She dreamed of marrying into money to escape her previous life. In April 1989, she met Christopher Dunn Butler, a butler who seemed to embody her dreams. He was 20 years older than her, a senior director at IBM, wealthy, sophisticated, and powerful, the perfect man for Jane. However, he was already in a relationship. Undeterred, Jane and Christopher began a secret affair, but Jane wanted more than secrecy. She offered Christopher an ultimatum. He had to choose between her and his current partner. He chose her, and soon their relationship was public. Within a year, they were engaged, and they married in August. What started as a fairy tale quickly turned sour. There was no passion or chemistry. They felt more like friends than romantic partners. Jane became restless again. She began having affairs one after the other, leading to the collapse of her marriage in 1994. The divorce didn't upset her. She had already met someone new, Dimitri Horn, a Greek businessman and son of a shipping magnate. They were introduced by the Duchess of York at another elegant event. Jane and Dimitri quickly became inseparable, enjoying fine dining, traveling, and living the romantic life she had always dreamed of. However, problems soon arose. Jane's jealousy resurfaced, growing increasingly intense. If Dimitri glanced at another woman, she noticed. If he spoke to one, she reacted with controlling and possessive behavior. Dimitri eventually reached his breaking point and ended the relationship. In a fit of rage, Jane didn't just leave, she vandalized his apartment, slashed his clothes, and destroyed his belongings in a turbulent frenzy. When things calmed down, she resorted to taking pills again, but this time the overdose wasn't fatal. She woke up feeling broken and alone. A year later, in 1997, Jane faced another setback. After 9 years of working with the Duchess of York, she was let go. The official reason was budget cuts. With Sarah now divorced from Prince Andrew, she could no longer afford the same staff. However, rumors suggested a different story. Sarah had reportedly started dating an Italian businessman and was concerned that Jane might catch his interest. Although there was no concrete evidence, the fear of betrayal lingered. Jane felt deeply hurt. She had dedicated herself to her role and rebuilt her identity, only to be dismissed. One thing was clear. Though she was determined not to return to Grimsby, she would remain in London. She started a new job managing the public image of a hotel in London, but just 2 months later, she was let go due to her lack of experience, which was apparent to everyone. Soon after, she found another opportunity at a high-end jewelry store in the city center. Jane took the job, not for the paycheck, but for the wealthy and influential clients she would meet. She was eager to network again. In 1998, a friend set her up on a blind date with a man named Thomas Ashley Cressman. Jane was 31 and Thomas was 37. From their first meeting, Jane was enchanted by him. He was tall, attractive, and successful, everything she had ever hoped for. Thomas came from an American family that had moved to the UK. His father was a self-made multimillionaire who built a successful chain of car dealerships across Europe. Thomas enjoyed a life of privilege, attending private schools and studying at a university in the United States, which was a stark contrast to Jane's childhood spent with outdoor toilets and searching for coins. Thomas loved cars, especially sports cars. He enjoyed working on engines, often spending hours building and modifying them. He was charming, enthusiastic, and attentive. During this time, he fell for Jane. While she was in Greece with friends, Thomas called her every day. When she came back, he welcomed her with a large bouquet of red roses. They quickly became inseparable. Within 3 months, Jane moved into Thomas's house, but old issues reappeared. Jane struggled with seeing Thomas interact with other women. She would hover, interrupt conversations, and pull him away. Even during innocent discussions, she needed to be the sole focus of his attention, and the possessiveness that had harmed her previous relationships returned. From the very start, Jane Andrews had one clear goal: to become Jane Cressman. She believed that Thomas was the perfect man for her, wealthy, handsome, romantic, and ideally suited to be her future husband. However, Thomas was in no hurry to commit, and Jane was quickly losing her patience. She started dropping hints in public, hoping that the pressure would encourage him to propose, but Thomas remained silent. Why was he hesitant? Was he having second thoughts? Or was there someone else Jane needed answers? So she decided to check his emails. There, she discovered her worst fear: messages exchanged with a woman he had met on a flight to the United States. She didn't know how serious their relationship was, but in Jane's mind, it could only mean one thing: he was cheating. That night, Jane confronted Thomas about the situation. He tried to reassure her that he had only met the woman once, and the emails didn't mean anything. However, Jane was extremely angry and humiliated, demanding to know the truth. To ease her frustration, Thomas suggested they take a trip to Italy. This trip was planned around a motorboat show that he couldn't afford to miss. After Italy, they would continue to the French Riviera, where his family had a vacation home. Jane agreed, secretly hoping that this trip would be special. As their 2-year anniversary approaches, she wished that, in the romantic setting of the Riviera, Thomas would finally propose. However, when they arrived, they were joined by friends. They spent their days enjoying boating, attending shows, and having fun. But Jane was still waiting for the proposal she desired. After days without any sign of a ring, she finally asked Thomas directly about their future. His response was disheartening. He said there would be no engagement, not now or ever, and he was starting to have doubts about their relationship. Jane was shocked. The reality she had built in her mind collapsed in an instant. They were arguing loudly, frustrated. She called a friend to express her feelings in detail, speaking loudly so others could hear her. Even during the car ride to the airport with Thomas, his mother, and his nephew, she continued to vent on the phone. The atmosphere was tense, but Jane was indifferent to everyone else's discomfort. On Sunday, September 17, 2000, 2 days after their return to London, Thomas's mother tried to call him. There was no answer. She kept calling, but still no response. She assumed Thomas and Jane were out, perhaps having lunch, or just needed some time apart. However, when Thomas still hadn't called by the next day, his mother's worry transformed into fear. By Monday afternoon, she decided to contact his workplace. That's when she truly began to panic. Thomas hadn't shown up for work at all and hadn't sent any messages. This was completely out of character for him. His mother asked one of his co-workers to check on him since the office was just across the street from Thomas's home, and they had a spare key. The employee knocked and rang the bell, but no one answered. He opened the door and called out, receiving only silence. The downstairs area was empty. He then went upstairs and found Thomas lying motionless on the floor, with blood surrounding him. The employee quickly went outside to call emergency services, but it was too late. When the police arrived, they discovered evidence that shocked everyone. A knife, which was missing from the kitchen, had been used to stab Thomas in the chest. Nearby, an abandoned cricket bat was found. Detectives suspected that Thomas had been struck on the head before being stabbed. There were no defensive wounds on his hands, indicating that he had not fought back. He had been attacked while sleeping in his pajamas, and his glasses were on the nightstand. Furthermore, there was no sign of forced entry. There were no broken windows or damaged locks. This indicated that the killer was already inside the house when the attack occurred. A pressing question occupied the minds of all investigators. Where was Jane Andrews? Her car was missing, and her phone was not in use. Was she a victim or the perpetrator? The police released a bulletin asking the public for any information regarding Jane's vehicle. Friends, including Sarah, tried to reach her, but there was no response. Then there was a breakthrough. Her car was seen on a highway west of London, and surveillance footage at a gas station confirmed that Jane had been driving alone. Meanwhile, evidence inside Thomas's home became increasingly incriminating. Handwritten notes were discovered, including one that stated, "Thomas is horrible to me, he treats me badly," and another that questioned, "What have I done?" Even more concerning was the finding of Jane's blood-stained clothes in the hallway, a bathrobe with the belt tied from the bedroom doorknob to the stair railing. If Thomas had survived the initial attack, he would have been trapped and unable to escape. Additionally, someone had taken a shower, as traces of Thomas's blood were found in the drain. This was not a crime of passion. it appeared to be premeditated. Jane Andrews was now missing, and investigators worried she might be trying to leave the country since her passport and credit cards were missing. Suddenly, her phone came to life with messages she was texting friends to ask about Thomas, feigning ignorance. Although her tone seemed relaxed and indifferent, the police remained suspicious. They traced her location through her messages and discovered she was still in England, on her way to Cornwall. Throughout the day, she sent multiple messages, but one friend maintained steady communication with her. That evening, Jane sent a disturbing message. She had taken a large number of pills. An immediate search was launched. Helicopters flew over the highways and countryside. 4 days later, her car was discovered parked in silence. Inside, Jane was found barely conscious, slumped in the back seat. She was taken to the hospital, where doctors pumped her stomach, and once again, she survived. When Jane woke up, she denied any involvement in Thomas's death, claiming she was unaware of what had happened and insisting she didn't kill him. Initially, she suggested that someone had broken into their home, but detectives quickly confirmed there was no evidence of a break-in. Later, she did admit to something, but not to murder. She said it was in self-defense. Jane explained to the investigators that their relationship had been abusive, stating that Thomas had physically assaulted her and that she had hidden a knife under the bed for her own protection because she was terrified of him. She explained that she had never shared her experience of abuse because she felt ashamed. She had never encountered such treatment before. Jane recounted that on the night Thomas died, he attempted to intimate with her, and when she refused, he slapped her, causing her to black out. She claimed she could not remember stabbing him and believed that Thomas was still alive when she left the house. But what truly happened? After returning from the French Riviera, the tension between Jane and Thomas escalated on their first day back and continued into the next morning. The house was filled with yelling. Jane was relentless, screaming and breaking things in Thomas's home. The man who once gave her roses now feared what she might do next. On Saturday, just before noon, Thomas called the police to report a violent argument. He warned the operator that the situation could escalate dangerously for either person involved. However, no officers were dispatched because there was no physical crime, only a heated disagreement. The operator advised them to calm down, but by the time things settled, Thomas had already died. By the end of April 2001, Jane Andrews was on trial at the Old Bailey. She admitted to killing Thomas Cressman but argued it was in self-defense. She portrayed him as abusive, controlling, and violent. But those who knew Thomas did not recognize this image of him. After nearly 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty. Jane Andrews was sentenced to life in prison for murdering her partner. She appealed the decision, but her appeal was denied. 9 years later, in 2010, Jane was transferred to an open prison, where inmates can leave during the day and return at night. However, one day she failed to return and was missing for 2 days. Eventually, she was found in a hotel just 6 miles away, where she had been meeting her parents. Although there were no penalties for her absence, it negatively affected her parole hearing. As a result, her release was denied in 2012. In 2015, 4 years later, officials determined that Jane was no longer a threat to society. She was granted parole and was released after spending 14 years in prison. Unfortunately, her freedom was short-lived. In 2018, she was arrested again for harassment and spent another year behind bars. When she was released on August 8, 2019, she moved to Lincolnshire and began a new life working in a supermarket, stocking shelves. Jane experienced a dramatic journey, moving from royal palaces to prison and, ultimately, to a life of quiet anonymity. During her time in custody, she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by intense emotional fluctuations, impulsive behavior, a profound fear of abandonment, and unstable relationships. Some experts suggest that this condition accounts for her violent outbursts, particularly her difficulty in coping with rejection, which was a significant factor in Thomas's murder. However, her mental health issues did not change the facts of the case, nor did they affect her sentencing. Thomas Cressman was just 39 years old. He had a bright future, a family, and many plans ahead of him. His death was sudden, brutal, and without reason. May we always remember him and let his story serve as a reminder of how fragile love can be, as well as the importance of asking for help when needed. Not all relationships are healthy. Some can be harmful, leave lasting emotional and physical damage. This is the troubling story of a romance between a prominent dentist and her coworker. From the beginning, their relationship displayed signs of turmoil. Over nearly 5 years, they broke up and reconciled multiple times. Despite the ups and downs, she remained optimistic, giving him numerous opportunities. In reality, he never truly let her go. He employed various forms of emotional manipulation, pressure, and psychological control to keep her close. When she finally gathered the strength to take charge of her life and informed him of her decision to move on for good, it triggered a series of events with catastrophic consequences. Preeti Reddy was born in the lively Indian city of Pimpri Chinchwad, located along the Pavana River. The family enjoyed a comfortable life due to her parents' stable and substantial income. Preeti grew up with her younger sister Nithya. From a young age, the sisters developed a strong bond and were almost inseparable. They shared everything: childhood secrets, dreams, and challenges. Their parents created a loving environment, emphasizing strong cultural values and respect for family. As financially secure individuals, their parents were committed to investing in their daughter's well-being and future. Education was a top priority in the Reddy home. The girls were given every opportunity to thrive. In 1996, the Reddy family made a significant change by moving to Australia in search of better opportunities and a brighter future. They settled in a quiet suburb of Sydney and bought a spacious home that quickly became their refuge. Preeti and Nithya started attending a well-regarded private school, where both thrived academically. Preeti developed into a bright, charismatic young woman who was friendly, sociable, and ambitious. From an early age, and she aspired to follow her parents' path in healthcare, finding true joy in helping others and making a positive impact. After finishing high school, Preeti made an unexpected decision to return to India to study dentistry at a medical university in New Delhi. Her parents, always supportive, trusted her choices and allowed her the freedom to decide for herself. By 2019, Preeti had earned her degree and returned to Sydney, where she moved back in with her family. She started working at the Dental and Physiotherapy Centre in Western Sydney, while also enhancing her skills at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne. Later, she joined Glenbrook Dental, a comprehensive care clinic, where she worked as a general practitioner. Highly skilled and passionate about her profession, Dr. Preeti Reddy was recognized by her colleagues and patients as a rising star in dentistry. She was committed to continuous learning and improving her expertise. In early 2013, just before a major life event, she was enrolled in specialized courses for dental implants, hoped to open her own clinic in Melbourne. Unfortunately, those dreams would remain unfulfilled. While still studying at the Royal Dental Hospital in Melbourne, Preeti met a young dentist named Harshwardhan Nard, whom his friends called Harshwardhan Nard. He, like Preeti, was of Indian descent and came from a family of healthcare professionals. Following their tradition by pursuing a career in dentistry, the two quickly connected, feeling an attraction toward each other almost right away. A few months into their friendship, they started dating, but early on, some warning signs emerged. Harshwardhan was possessive and had a quick temper. He frequently questioned Preeti's choices, emotionally manipulated her, and tried to control her subtly. He also undermined her confidence, making her feel inadequate or inferior. He often blamed her for his struggles and claimed she was the source of his pain. Nithya, Preeti's younger sister, was the first to sense that something was wrong. She knew Preeti was dating someone, but Preeti had never introduced him to the family. She never brought him home and avoided talking about him. At the same time, Preeti's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, insecure, and distant. The spark in her eyes faded, turning her from a joyful and confident woman into someone who seemed tense, under emotional strain. Harshvardhan was controlling the relationship, and Preeti appeared trapped. Their parents often asked to meet this man in Preeti's life, but she consistently changed the subject or refused to discuss it. It was clear that she felt uncomfortable in the relationship, yet she remained emotionally tied to Harshvardhan and found it difficult to escape. Harshvardhan lived in Tamworth and worked at a dental clinic. He was in a long-distance relationship with Preeti, as they never lived together. Deep down, she felt that their relationship wouldn't end well. It was unstable, filled with frequent arguments and emotional tension, leaving Preeti feeling overwhelmed. For a long time, she kept their relationship a secret. It wasn't until about 6 months in that she shared it with a few close friends. Preeti's sister, Nithya, met Harshvardhan a few times and immediately disliked him. She later remembered feeling that there was something unsettling about his presence. By 2014, Preeti and Harshvardhan were publicly acknowledged as a couple, but their relationship remained complicated. Preeti never introduced him to her parents and refused to meet his family. Soon after, they broke up, but Preeti chose to keep it private. This cycle of breaking up and getting back together continued for years. At times, she wouldn't inform anyone about their breakups, and at other times, she wouldn't admit they had reconciled. It became clear that she felt embarrassed by their unstable relationship. Harshvardhan often accused Preeti of not investing enough in their relationship and pushed her to move to Tamworth so they could live together. However, Preeti was resolute. She didn't want to abandon her career or leave her family in Sydney. Meanwhile, Harshvardhan was unwilling to move for her. In the fall of 2016, Preeti and Harshvardhan broke up again. Preeti wanted it to be final this time, but Harshvardhan wasn't ready to let go. In October, he started planning a surprise party for her upcoming 30th birthday. However, the surprise did not happen because Preeti had already organized a celebration at her parents' house, invited close friends and colleagues, deliberately excluding Harshvardhan. Despite this clear message, Harshvardhan continued to try to re-enter her life. He pleaded for another chance, insisting that he had changed and that things would be different this time. Although he had never been physically aggressive, his constant emotional pressure had caused Preeti significant distress. This lack of visible harm may have contributed to Preeti deciding to give him one last opportunity, hoping for a fresh start. However, things did not improve. Preeti still had emotional feelings for Harshvardhan, which made it difficult to cut ties completely. Additionally, Harshvardhan manipulated her emotions, making her feel guilty for the end of their relationship. In 2018, Preeti made one last attempt to save her relationship, but soon realized that no matter how much she tried or sacrificed, nothing was going to change. That fall, she decided to end it for good. Just a few weeks later, in November, she met a young physician from Melbourne, and they quickly formed a genuine connection. This new man was everything Harshvardhan was not: kind, attentive, and compassionate. For the first time in years, Preeti was open about her relationship, proudly introducing him to her family and friends. She felt truly happy and hopeful about the future. She even considered moving to Melbourne to be closer to him by applying for jobs in the area. Prestigious dental centers quickly responded to her applications, and after receiving multiple offers, she chose a clinic where she hoped to work after completing her responsibilities in Sydney. In December, she excitedly told her friends that she had never felt this way before. She had finally moved on from her past. Her loved ones were delighted to see her so happy. But unfortunately, this joy was short-lived. In January, Harshvardhan found out that Preeti was in a new relationship. Overwhelmed by jealousy and anger, he began contacting her again through calls and messages, hoping to meet her. However, Preeti had decided to move on and ignored all of his attempts to reach her. By February, during a phone conversation with his brother, Harshvardhan admitted that he couldn't accept what he felt was a betrayal. He spoke about Preeti as if she were still his, viewing her new relationship as a personal insult. He expressed that he wouldn't let her marry someone else and suggested he might take extreme actions. At the time, his words seemed like mere bitter threats, stemming from frustration and a sense of powerlessness. On March 1st, 2019, Sydney hosted a two-day international dental conference showcasing the latest advancements in dentistry. Dr. Preethi attended the conference and stayed at the Swissôtel Hotel with two close friends and colleagues. Her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Harshwardhan, also rented a room at this hotel. After the first day, Preethi shared with her friends that she felt uneasy because Harshwardhan was watching her closely throughout the conference and seemed to be waiting for a chance to talk to her. His behavior was making her feel uncomfortable and unpredictable. Later that evening, the friends went to a nightclub to relax, but Preethi still felt anxious and kept looking over her shoulder. The second day was filled with even more tension as Harshwardhan insisted they meet and talk. Preethi felt anxious and conflicted, while her friends urged her not to give in despite their concerns. After the conference, she reluctantly decided to speak with Harshwardhan, hoping to resolve their issues. She had practiced what she wanted to say, wishing he would listen and put an end to the drama so she could continue with her life. At around 6:30 p.m. On March 2nd, surveillance cameras recorded a gray Volkswagen Golf, which belonged to Preethi, leaving the underground garage of Swissôtel Hotel. Preethi was driving, and Harshwardhan was seated next to her. About an hour later, they arrived at the Ravi's Cumin Indian restaurant in nearby Crow's Nest and entered together. Witnesses, including other diners and restaurant staff, noted that there was significant tension at their table. Preethi looked anxious and wanted to leave, while Harshwardhan tried to hold her hand and interrupted her as she spoke. The waiter in charge of their table recalled that Preethi mentioned she was planning to move to Melbourne, confessed to being in love with someone else, and asked Harshwardhan to let her go. Despite this, Harshwardhan seemed unaware of her feelings. He continued to talk about marriage and promised to move to Sydney just to be close to her. Around 10:16 p.m., they left the restaurant and walked to their car but didn't get in. They argued for over an hour at that spot. Surveillance cameras show Harshwardhan reaching out towards Preethi, then pushing her as she backed away and took a step back, causing her to stumble. They finally drove off close to midnight and spent another 15 minutes driving around the city before stopping in a mall parking lot. Neither of them got out of the car. Surveillance cameras on the building captured them in a heated argument, with Harshwardhan making wild gestures and Preethi crying visibly. At about 2 p.m., Preethi got out of the car and entered a 24-hour fast food restaurant in the mall. She bought a bottle of water and waited near the entrance, seemingly for Harshwardhan to come out. However, when she went back, he was still sitting in the car. They then drove to the Swissôtel Hotel. He quietly led Preethi past the front desk and into his suite. After around 3 a.m., she did not leave. On the morning of March 3rd, around 10 a.m., Preethi called her younger sister to say she would be home in a couple of hours. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Her family expected her to be home by lunchtime, but she never arrived. It was unusual for her phone to be off. By 3 p.m., worry turned into panic. Preethi was always in contact and would inform someone if she was running late. Her family quickly began reaching out to her friends and coworkers to find out where she might be. It was then they discovered that she had been seen at a conference with her ex, Harshwardhan, who was reportedly trying to reconnect with her and had been persistent. Nithya attempted to call Harshwardhan, but he either ignored her calls or didn't answer, even though his phone was still on. On the evening of March 3rd, the Reddy family went to the police to report Preethi missing, expressing their concerns that her ex-boyfriend might be involved. Simultaneously, they began their own search by reaching out to anyone who might have seen or talked to Preethi. Nithya also posted on social media, sharing recent photos and asking for any information to help locate her sister. Within 24 hours, her post reached nearly 2,000 people, including Preethi's former patients. Many offered to assist in the search or to help spread the word, but no one had any concrete information about Preethi's location. The only potential lead remained Harshwardhan, who continued to avoid answering calls. On the afternoon of March 4th, Harshwardhan finally took one of Nithya's calls. He responded in a disturbingly calm manner, stating that Preethi was an adult who would return soon. He acknowledged seeing her at the conference but claimed they had only spoken briefly before going their separate ways. Oddly, just an hour later, Harshwardhan called Nithya back, this time very angry. He yelled at her, asking why she was contacting his friends, family, and co-workers about Preeti. He accused the Reddy family of unfairly blaming him and damaging his reputation without any proof. His reaction raised serious concerns, while he showed little worry about Preeti's sudden disappearance or the possibility that she might be in danger. He seemed more upset that people were searching for her and that attention was being directed at him. After discovering the situation, it was clear that Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, and he likely became the last person to see her. Harshwardhan's family urged him to go to the police and provide a full account before any formal summons. Later that day, he went to a police station in Sydney, saying he wanted to assist and share what he knew. Officers quickly noticed his unusual behavior. He was sweating, visibly anxious, and pacing while gesturing wildly. He claimed to have seen Preeti not only at a conference but also during dinner on March 2nd. He stated that they had a final conversation that helped them both move on, and that he called her a cab, which he said was the last time he saw her. However, there were inconsistencies in his story. When asked to repeat the events, he became confused, contradicted himself, and struggled to keep his timeline consistent. Despite his odd behavior, the police had no solid evidence to detain him, so they let him go. Before he left, a detective casually mentioned that they were examining surveillance footage that might show the movements of both Preeti and Harshwardhan that evening, intending to reconstruct the timeline. This statement appeared to unsettle Harshwardhan. A few hours later, he returned to the police station and changed his story. He confessed that he hadn't called a cab for Preeti. She had actually driven herself in her own car, which was the same Volkswagen Golf they had used to go to the restaurant. When questioned about why he had initially lied, he said he was nervous and didn't think those details were important. Later that day, on March 4th, news reported a serious car accident on the New England highway. A BMW had sped into oncoming traffic and collided head-on with a truck. The driver was pronounced dead at the scene and was identified as Dr. Harshwardhan Nard. This raised the question, how did he end up in such a terrible accident on a mostly empty road? Surveillance footage showed that Harshwardhan had quickly sped up and deliberately driven into the truck's path. This incident appeared to be an act of self-harm, and further evidence soon supported this idea. It was evident that the detective's mention of the footage had left Harshwardhan visibly shaken. He likely understood that investigators would soon reconstruct the events of the entire evening. The day after Harshwardhan's death, Preeti's abandoned Volkswagen Golf was discovered in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Sydney. Inside the trunk, in a large blue suitcase, was her lifeless body. Forensic investigators later confirmed that she had suffered a severe head injury and multiple stab wounds, 11 in total, mostly to her neck and back. 2 days later, after reviewing security footage and interviewing witnesses, the police were able to piece together the events of March 2nd. Preeti had agreed to meet Harshwardhan for dinner, likely seeking closure and trying to move on from their relationship. A waiter, who overheard parts of their conversation, remembered that Preeti appeared upset and frightened. After dinner, they drove around for a few hours before arriving at Swissôtel Hotel. It is suspected that he emotionally manipulated her, a tactic he had used in the past, making her feel guilty. Since she was never seen leaving the hotel, detectives believe that the tragic event likely took place in the room. A forensic investigation uncovered traces of blood in the bathroom, although it had been cleaned so thoroughly that housekeeping noticed nothing unusual. It is thought that Preeti went to the bathroom to call her new partner, and that Harshwardhan, overhearing the call, became enraged. Once she ended the call, he attacked her from behind, hitting her on the head and then inflicting multiple wounds with a sharp object. After finishing what he had to do, Harshwardhan calmly cleaned himself up and went to the front desk to extend his stay for another night. He had breakfast in the hotel restaurant before heading out to shop at local stores. There, he bought a large blue suitcase and various cleaning supplies. He returned to his hotel room around 5 p.m., checked out, and when a staff member offered to help with his luggage, they remarked that the suitcase seemed quite heavy. Harshwardhan casually explained that he had bought too many gifts for his family. He then loaded his belongings into Preethi's Volkswagen Golf and drove to a quiet corner of the city, where he parked the car in a discreet spot, hoping it would remain unnoticed for some time. After everything that happened, Harshwarden picked up his BMW from the parking garage and drove home to Tamworth. On the way, he stopped at a gas station to fill his tank and grab some coffee. Several witnesses later identified him there, noting that his phone kept ringing, but he either declined the calls or ignored them. It was later confirmed that those calls were from Nithya, who was desperately trying to contact him while looking for her sister. Harshwarden likely thought he had committed the perfect crime, covering his tracks so well that investigators wouldn't be able to connect him to anything. He hadn't considered that there were surveillance cameras at almost every place he and Preethi had gone that day. Those recordings would soon reveal the truth. When Harshwardhan understood his error that the police would have clear evidence of his involvement, he decided not to wait for an arrest or trial. Instead, he took control of the situation and ended his life before justice could catch up with him. Harshwarden's family, despite the increasing evidence against him, struggled to accept the idea that he could commit such a terrible act. They found it hard to believe he could take another person's life in such a brutal and deliberate way. Meanwhile, the Reddy family, grieving the loss of their cherished daughter and sister, decided to take action. They started a campaign to create the first center in Australia focused on helping women impacted by domestic violence. This center would not only provide emotional support, but also offer safe housing, legal advice, and help for those trying to leave abusive or manipulative relationships. The Reddy family played a key role in supporting the project by providing funding, using their voices to raise public awareness through media and outreach. They made sure that people in need were aware of a safe place to go, where they could find both protection and support for healing. A girl set out from her home to visit a friend but never arrived. Initially, the police found no clues, and the case went cold. For years, it seemed that the answer was just out of reach, and no one could solve the mystery. Decades later, everything changed when the truth emerged in an unexpected way. Claire Tiltman was born on January 14, 1977, in the small British village of Greenhithe. As an only child, she attended an all-girls school where she made many friends. From a young age, Claire was focused and determined. She aspired to be one of the first female firefighters in the country. During high school, she volunteered at charity events organized by the local fire department, offering her assistance in any way possible. However, she was also committed to earning a college degree before pursuing her dream career. In January 1993, when Claire was 16 years old, she was busy with her final exams and considering her future education. On January 18th, just 4 days after her birthday, she went to a friend's house to discuss college options and potential applications. Claire left home around 6 p.m., informing her mom that she would return in about an hour and a half. However, when that time passed, Claire still had not come back. Initially, Claire's mom suspected that she had simply lost track of time and might have stayed longer at her friend's house. However, when it was past 8 p.m., her concern grew. She called Claire's friend's house, only to learn that Claire had never arrived. Believing that plans might have changed, she began calling some of Claire's other friends, but nobody had seen her that evening. A few minutes later, Claire's mom went outside and encountered a neighbor who informed her about an incident a few miles away. The area had ambulances and numerous police cars. Feeling anxious at the time, Claire's mom went directly to the local police station to report her daughter missing. She gave them a detailed description of Claire, but instead of taking her report, the officers asked her to return home. They mentioned that there had been an incident and that someone would come by shortly to explain the situation. A short time later, police arrived at her door with devastating news that no parent ever wants to hear. Her daughter had been found dead just hours earlier. That evening, 2 men were driving along a road connecting nearby towns when they noticed a girl kneeling by the roadside. Concerned, they stopped to check on her. As they got closer, they realized something was seriously wrong. She was struggling to breathe and appeared to be unresponsive. One man quickly ran to a nearby pub to call for help while the other stayed with her. Initially, he thought she might have been hit by a car since she was so close to the road. He tried to comfort her, but her condition deteriorated rapidly. Within minutes, she stopped breathing entirely, and when paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Her body was taken to the medical examiner, and the findings were shocking. She had been stabbed 9 times, likely with a large knife, but there were no signs of abuse. Meanwhile, the police started investigating the crime scene and quickly identified where the attack had occurred. Claire was probably ambushed in a narrow alleyway off the main road leading to her friend's house. The nature of her injuries suggested that the attacker approached her from behind. However, there was little else to help the investigation. The alley was quiet, dark, and deserted. There were no security cameras, witnesses, or helpful evidence. One crucial detail stood out. The medical examiner noted the murder weapon was unusually large, too big to be carried casually in a pocket. Detectives suspected that the killer had brought the knife from home, indicating a premeditated plan to use it. News of the murder quickly spread through Claire's village and neighboring towns. That evening, some students were still at school studying for exams when they heard the news on the radio. Initially, the victim's identity was unknown, but it wasn't long before rumors circulated. With no strong leads in the investigation, the police sought help from the public. A few people came forward claiming to have seen a man in a light-colored coat near the road around 7 p.m. Another witness reported seeing a man with dark, curly hair leaving an alleyway, but neither individual could be identified, despite the tight-knit nature of the community. Detectives suspected that the attacker might have had a personal connection to Claire, which could explain the motive. However, they also considered a more alarming possibility that this incident could be part of a pattern, indicating that they might be dealing with a serial offender. In December 1988, 4 years before Claire was murdered, a 27-year-old woman was attacked by an unknown assailant while walking home from work. He was armed with a gun and a knife, abducted her, and drove to a remote area where he attempted to assault her. After stabbing her 5 times, he left her, believing she was dead. Miraculously, she survived. Despite her severe injuries and the freezing temperatures, she crawled to a nearby road, where a group of workers found her. She spent 9 days in intensive care, and doctors successfully saved her life. However, the police were never able to identify or capture her attacker. After Claire was murdered, detectives and local residents started to suspect that the same individual might be responsible for both crimes. A few days later, Claire's funeral took place, drawing hundreds of people from the community. Prior to the funeral, her parents spoke to reporters and mentioned that they feared the killer might attend the service. The detectives shared this concern, so they were present at the funeral and carefully noted everyone who attended. However, this effort still did not lead them to the person responsible for her murder. In the weeks that followed, the police continued to question local residents and investigate leads, but they did not find any useful information. Over 2 years passed, and it began to feel like the case would remain unsolved. Gradually, as people stopped discussing what happened to Claire, until one day, everything changed. On October 17, 1995, a local woman was returning home from work when a man attacked her just a few hundred yards from where Claire had been stabbed. The attacker used a knife. When the woman fell and screamed, he fled the scene. Fortunately, she survived despite her injuries. However, detectives faced challenges since the attacker approached her from behind, so she couldn't describe his face or any specific features. Luckily, a witness stepped forward and reported seeing a white Ford Capri nearby. This information allowed investigators to quickly identify the car's owner, a local milkman named Colin. Police remembered that they had previously spoken to Colin right after Claire's murder. He had called them to report seeing a man with dark hair near the crime scene. However, when detectives met with him a few weeks later, his story had changed slightly. Initially, Colin said he was driving on that road around 6:30 p.m., but now he insisted it was closer to 5:30 p.m. Nevertheless, he had an alibi. His mother told the police that they had been driving together and were already home when Claire was attacked. Detectives had more reasons to be suspicious of Colin. He drove a white Ford Capri, which witnesses had also spotted near another attack. Colin was known for wearing a light-colored trench coat, matching the description given by several witnesses from both crime scenes. He also had light-colored hair, and two different people reported seeing a fair-haired man near the alley where Claire was murdered. These factors led detectives to seriously consider him as a suspect and to obtain a warrant to search his home. Police discovered a large knife in the house that matched the wounds of the latest victim. However, that was just the start of their findings. They also found a hidden journal, which contained shocking revelations. In the diary, Colin confessed to attacking a woman in 1988, referring to it as his masterpiece, and claiming it had a 95% success rate. When he learned that the victim had survived, he expressed a desire to do better next time. Additionally, he mentioned an attempt to sneak into a care home to kill someone, but stated that the plan failed. Colin Ash Smith shared some unsettling experiences from his past. He revealed that he admitted to threatening his first victim, warning her that if she reported him to the police, he would harm someone else. Additionally, Colin confessed to a stabbing incident in 1995. He was angry with his girlfriend, believing she was unfaithful. In his rage, he drove around looking for someone to hurt. Initially, he saw a man but thought that would be too risky. Later, he noticed a woman walking alone, stopped his car and attacked her. Afterward, he felt a sense of relief and was indifferent about the woman's fate. The diary revealed his intentions to commit additional murders and mentioned that he had broken into the homes of several women he knew while they were away. When police examined Colin's car, they discovered blood-stained clothes and a torn piece of a tie, which he had used in an attempt to strangle his first victim. This evidence was sufficient to charge him with attacks on both women. Detectives also believed he was responsible for Claire's murder and began investigating for any possible connections. Colin's family was familiar with Claire's family. They both frequented the same community center, a social hub for residents. Remarkably, Claire had celebrated her birthday at that center just 4 days before her death, and Colin had been there the same night. Investigators also noted that Colin attended her funeral. However, despite these connections, there was no concrete evidence linking him to her murder. While Colin was in jail, detectives interrogated him, but he denied any involvement. He did present a theory, suggesting that the killer could be a man who used to play pool with Claire at the community center. Colin claimed that this man left town soon after the murder and that he last saw him at Claire's funeral. Police were able to locate the man, but he did not match any of the witness descriptions of someone seen near the crime scene. In contrast, Colin fit the descriptions perfectly, but the police still lacked sufficient evidence to charge him. Colin was ultimately charged only for the two attacks that occurred in 1988 and 1995. In December 1996, he pleaded guilty and received life sentences, with the chance of parole after 15 years. However, investigators continued their pursuit of justice for Claire, seeking any evidence that could strengthen their case against him. Among all the possible suspects, Colin remained the most likely, but there were significant challenges: a lack of physical evidence and his alibi. Colin called the police the day after the murder, claiming he saw a man with dark hair near the scene about an hour later. However, this call contradicted his own alibi because, according to his account, he would have had to be very close to the alley when Claire was attacked. This raised suspicions among detectives. Was his mother lying to protect him? Detectives continued their investigation and eventually revealed the truth. Colin's alibi was entirely fabricated. They found concrete evidence showing that his mother was not with him that evening, indicating that she had lied to protect him. In addition to this, investigators made another unsettling discovery. They learned that Colin's father had disposed of a knife that Colin had brought home after the 1995 attack. He confessed to boiling the knife, taking it apart, and throwing away the pieces just hours before police arrived with a search warrant. As a result, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. Colin's mother was also involved. She later gave an interview to a local TV station where she claimed it was her idea for her husband to dispose of the knife. She insisted that she believed her son was innocent and was afraid that the police would wrongfully accuse him of someone else's crime. Despite their extensive investigation, police still lack sufficient evidence to charge Colin with Claire's murder. While he served time for other attacks, detectives continued to explore his background in hopes of finding a connection to the crime, but they came up empty-handed. The only notable find occurred during a routine search of his prison cell, where officers discovered disturbing notes filled with graphic fantasies about women he knew. These notes resembled pages from his old diary and painted a troubling picture of his mindset. After that, the investigation stalled. Claire's parents believed Colin was the murderer, and it weighed heavily on them that the police couldn't charge him. Sadly, Claire's mother died of cancer in 2008, and her father passed away in 2012, so neither lived to see justice for their daughter. In 2013, the case gained public attention again as detectives renewed their efforts to identify the killer. They reached out to the public for any information, and even the Prime Minister supported their appeal. Although many tips came in, none were helpful until a former cellmate of Colin's, Stephen Dubois, stepped forward with new information. He claimed that Colin had bragged about attacking a girl one day. According to him, Colin recounted seeing her at a crosswalk and described how he suddenly lost control. Detectives quickly noticed an important detail. Claire had been using a crosswalk that led directly into the alley where she was attacked. In contrast, the other two victims had been found far from any crosswalks. This clue strongly indicated that Colin might have been referring to Claire or possibly another victim that the police had not yet identified. However, detectives were skeptical about the existence of other victims since there were no similar unsolved cases reported in the area. Detectives did not have enough evidence to prove guilt yet, but they decided it was time to present all their findings and attempt to take the case to trial. Meanwhile, a new law in the UK was enacted, allowing prosecutors to introduce a suspect's previous convictions in court. This could significantly impact Claire's case. Colin was already serving a sentence for 2 violent attacks that were strikingly similar to Claire's case and occurred only a short distance from where she was killed. Additionally, investigators had testimony from Stefan and solid evidence that Colin's alibi was fabricated. With this information, prosecutors felt they had enough to proceed. On February 12, 2014, detectives announced that Colin had officially been charged with Claire's murder. This was significant timing, as it coincided with his first scheduled parole hearing. Instead of being released, he remained in jail while prosecutors prepared for trial. During the proceedings, he revealed even more unsettling information. He disclosed that he began sneaking out of his house at night when he was about 19 or 20 years old, taking a knife with him and roaming the streets, looking for someone to kill. Colin expressed that for him, it was about feeling powerful and having control over others. As he didn't want to appear weak, his ex-girlfriend testified that Colin started behaving unusually right after Claire was murdered. Initially, she thought he was just as shaken as everyone else in town, but later realized there was more going on. When asked about his feelings toward women, Colin admitted he both loved and hated them. He acknowledged that he struggled with low self-esteem and often felt worthless, which made it difficult for him to trust anyone, especially women. He also mentioned that he owned a collection of 20 to 30 knives at home, along with a crossbow and several air rifles, and his parents were aware of his collection. Additionally, Colin confessed that he never left the house without carrying a knife. When Stefan was called to testify, the prosecution faced an unexpected problem. Stefan stated that he could not clearly remember what Colin had said to him and acknowledged that he might have mixed up the conversation with someone else. The trial lasted 5 weeks, and on December 11, 2014, the jury found Colin guilty of murdering Claire Tiltman. He received a life sentence in prison, with the chance for parole after 21 years. When the verdict was announced, Colin showed no emotion. He later appealed the decision, but the court turned it down, stating that the evidence against him was overwhelming. After 26 long years, justice was finally served. Following his conviction, detectives branded Ash Smith absolutely evil and said he should never be released. Jaswant Narwal, chief prosecutor for CPS Southeast, called the case one of the most complex that CPS Southeast has dealt with in recent years. In November 2015, Ash Smith appealed against his conviction on the grounds that Judge Sweeney was wrong to allow seriously harmful material to be put before the jury. However, the appeal was dismissed by Judge Davis and two other judges of appeal. He is currently being held at HMP Durham. In honor of Claire, local officials first named a road after her, and later they renamed a street using her last name. In 2022, a new community center was opened, proudly named after Claire Tiltman. Claire Tiltman's tragic murder left an indelible mark on Greenhithe, but her legacy endures through the community's unwavering pursuit of justice and the tributes that honor her vibrant spirit. After 26 years, Colin Ash Smith's conviction brought closure to a case that once seemed unsolvable, underscoring the resilience of Kent police and the impact of new legal measures. While Claire's parents did not live to see this resolution, her memory lives on in the road, street, and community center named after her, inspiring future generations to embody her determination and kindness. The case stands as a testament to the power of perseverance, ensuring that Claire's light continues to shine brightly in the hearts of those who knew her and beyond. Yvonne Lohr dreamed of discovering the world, feeling free, exploring ancient lands, and sharing joyful selfies from the farthest corners of the earth. Then, on a bright morning in Egypt, everything changed. After a series of frantic text messages, there was only silence. This is the story of Yvonne Lohr, a daughter, a sister, a traveler. A group of tourists, including her, goes missing under shocking circumstances need unraveling a mysterious plot far from home. Yvonne Lohr was born on May 11, 2000 in Colombia. She is the eldest daughter of Mary Sanchez and Diego Lohr, and grew up with her younger brother, with whom she shared a strong and inseparable bond. Although little is known about her early life, it is clear that, as an adult, Yvonne made a courageous choice. She moved to Europe in hopes of a brighter future. She settled in Barcelona, Spain. Her friends and family described her as strong, very sensitive, and extremely loyal. She cared deeply for her loved ones and supported her family in Colombia by working multiple jobs, sometimes holding as many as 3 at the same time. Although her exact positions in Spain are not clear, her determination to support others was unquestionable. Yvonne loved adventure, and her social media accounts were filled with photos from her travels, showcasing her independence and lively spirit. In April 2025, Yvonne organized a trip that would turn out to be her most unforgettable adventure, and also her last. This time, she wouldn't be traveling alone. Her close friend Stefania Bedoya, a Colombian woman 5 years older than her, would be joining her. Stefania became well known in Colombia after winning the title of Miss Antioquia in the 2023-2024 pageant. She had been trained as a flight attendant and was currently working in digital marketing and modeling. Yvonne Lohr and her close friend Stefania Bedoya had planned the trip in advance with great anticipation. Stefania arrived in Barcelona on April 15th. After spending a few days together, they flew to Cairo, Egypt, on April 24th. Why Egypt? The choice of destination was intentional. Both had tickets to Samna, one of the region's largest electronic music festivals, which was scheduled for April 25th and 26th. For Yvonne, the timing couldn't have been better. She was about to celebrate her 25th birthday in the most exciting way she could imagine, dancing under the stars in a new country. The festival began with happiness music, dancing, laughter, and meeting new people. That was when they met Jessie Escobar. Jessie introduced herself at the event and was accompanied by 2 men, whom she also introduced as her friends. The 5 seemed to connect naturally and easily. Soon, the girls and their new friends began spending more and more time together. Yvonne, always open and spontaneous, shared stories about their night on Instagram. In her videos from Friday night, April 25th, she appeared radiant and joyful, surrounded by vibrant lights and lively energy. By that point, the girls trusted Jessie enough that when she asked for the address of their hotel, they gave it to her, Jesse told them she would pick them up on April 27th at 9 a.m. to take them to another party. Everything changed on the morning of April 27th. At about 11:04 a.m., Yvonne started sending urgent messages to her family. But these weren't her usual cheerful updates, they were warnings. She wrote that someone was trying to hurt them and wanted to take them away by force. She shared her live location and urgently asked for help. In another message, she pleaded for the police to get involved. She said there were men outside their room and more cars were arriving. Every word was filled with panic. Despite her distress, Yvonne quickly contacted a friend in Spain. This time, she spoke openly and without hesitation. She said clearly, "If anything happens to me, I hold a woman on social media named Mescore1020 responsible." She sent a screenshot of the profile. Investigators later confirmed what the message suggested. Mescore 2020 was Jessie, the woman they had met at the festival. Then everything went silent. Yvonne stopped answering messages. Her phone was turned off, and her family never heard from her again. As more time passed without any news from Yvonne after her last message, her family became increasingly worried. One call after another went unanswered. What frightened them even more was that Stefania had also gone silent. 2 days passed. On April 29th, there was finally a small update. The family managed to get in touch with a woman named Natalia, who knew both parties. Natalia confirmed that Stefania was alive and staying at a hotel. This brought relief, but it was only temporary. Stefania didn't contact Yvonne's family directly until the following day, April 30th. Her words turned their world upside down. Yvonne was in intensive care and in a coma. There was no explanation or further details, just this stark, simple fact. Yvonne's parents were shocked by how calm Stefania sounded. No one seemed panicked. Everything remained calm, and no one hurried to explain things to them. This wasn't how a close friend would react, especially not someone who had traveled around the world with her. But the odd events continued. For several days, Stefania would not reveal which hospital it was. No location was shared, no photos were uploaded, and no updates were provided. The family felt isolated by distance and language barriers, unable to get help or clear information as time quickly slipped away. Yvonne's family began searching frantically. They contacted all the hospitals, clinics, and emergency rooms in Cairo. After many attempts and several formal requests, they finally received confirmation that Yvonne was in a public hospital. Her condition was very serious. She had several broken bones and needed a ventilator to help her breathe. The doctors said that her brain activity and vital signs were almost undetectable. When faced with something unimaginable, her family did everything they could. They started a fundraising campaign to collect donations for Mary, Yvonne's mother, so she could travel to Egypt and support her daughter. The response was incredible, coming from friends, strangers, Colombians, and compassionate people worldwide. Thanks to the generous donations, Mary was able to quickly book a flight, hurrying toward a reunion she had never expected to happen in this way. There was still a glimmer of hope, the chance to move Yvonne to Spain for specialized treatment, and the thought that she might survive after all. But that hope quickly faded. Yvonne passed away on May 4th, 2025, after spending 8 days in a coma. Her injuries were too severe, and the trauma was too great for her body to recover. Her family was heartbroken and overwhelmed, but they couldn't grieve, not yet. They wanted to know the truth. They began urging the governments of Egypt and Colombia to conduct a prompt and transparent investigation. The family wanted to understand what had happened in the last hours of their daughter's life. The messages Yvonne sent before disappearing were soon discovered, revealing unsettling information. In one message, Yvonne warned that the men she was with claimed to be producers and promised to make her a star in the music industry. This was not true. Her family also revealed that these men were only known by their nicknames, El Serbio and El Doctor. Then, something unexpected happened. I had a conversation with Stefania. Stefania stated that Yvonne had fallen from a significant height when she was not there. But that was only the beginning of a series of contradictions. Over time, Stefania's account of what happened started to change. At first, the differences were subtle, but they gradually became more noticeable. With each new version, there were more questions than answers. Egyptian authorities said they had started an investigation. They stated that Stefania had been questioned and that attempts were being made to find Jesse and the two unidentified men. However, there were still no tangible outcomes, no arrests, no clues, and no resolution. Yvonne's family looked on in shock as the investigation began to lose momentum. They publicly accused both the Egyptian authorities and the Colombian consulate of negligence, making their claims widely known on both continents. From the beginning, they encountered indifference, delays, and a lack of support. Time was running out. The investigation was progressing too slowly. Meanwhile, they faced another difficult challenge. Yvonne's body was still in Egypt. The family didn't have enough money to bring her home, so they appealed to the public for help once again. A second fundraising campaign was launched, not only to seek justice, but also to give people the opportunity to say goodbye. As the days passed without any answers, Yvonne's family and friends were overwhelmed by a harsh truth. Those responsible for explaining what happened either remained silent or, even more troubling, continued to give conflicting accounts. Her loved ones reached out to the public as a last resort. They launched a widespread campaign on social media and in the news, not to assign blame, but to ensure that no other case would go unnoticed. They wanted to know the truth. They needed to know why Yvonne died and who was with her when it happened. On Tuesday, May 6th, a powerful new voice joined the fight for justice. Angie Giraldo, a close friend of Yvonne's, posted a 5-minute video that quickly went viral on the internet. She pointed out troubling contradictions in Stefania's earlier statements and also presented important new evidence. Angie's message was not only one of grief, but also a plea for clarity, truth, and for the world to reflect on Yvonne's final moments. The video spread rapidly on social media, sparking renewed public outrage and stronger calls for a thorough investigation. Angie explained her case clearly, providing screenshots, photos, and video clips. She said these were first posted by Stefania on social media, but were later deleted for unknown reasons. Luckily, those posts were saved. This material provides a more complete view, showing parts of the girls' trip and their interactions following the incident that left Yvonne fighting for her life. The findings contradicted the official accounts. They raised questions about the timeline, the people involved, and the overall story that was being presented. Based on the evidence Angie gathered and presented, Stefania and Jesse were the two women most involved in the situation. Neither of them was able to give a clear or consistent explanation of what happened. Both their public and private statements were inconsistent, often containing gaps and contradictions. Neither woman could provide a clear timeline, explain how Yvonne was injured, or give a logical account of events from beginning to end. Instead of providing clarity, their statements only created more confusion. As a result, confusion increased, suspicion intensified, and people around the world began paying closer attention. Stefania herself exhibited some of the most troubling inconsistencies. Angie included social media posts that Stefania had shared after the incident, and these posts appeared to be completely out of touch with reality. At one point, Stefania casually mentioned to a friend that she planned to eat at a luxury restaurant in Cairo, even though, at that same time, Yvonne was in the hospital in critical condition, fighting for her life. Despite everything, Stefania seemed unconcerned. The tone of her messages angered people, who wondered why she was not showing any sadness, urgency, or compassion. As these details came to light, more people began to doubt Stefania's involvement and to wonder if she had been completely honest. Stefania's actions were concerning, but Jesse's reaction was equally troubling, urgently seeking answers. Yvonne's family reached out to Jesse personally, hoping she could provide a clear explanation, something that would bring them peace, or at least help them understand. Instead, they received unclear answers, evasive voice messages, and even more conflicting statements. Jessie never provided a specific timeline. She spoke vaguely and did not seem concerned. Her account did not clarify or explain what actually happened that night. Her hesitation led people to become more distrustful and increasingly believe that important information was being withheld. In another leaked conversation, Stefania was overheard advising someone to remain calm and to follow all instructions. She referred to what happened to Yvonne merely as a difficult situation, without providing any details or showing any concern. To Yvonne's loved ones, these reactions did not indicate fear or trauma, but rather a sense of detachment, which only made them more suspicious. Let's remember that Stefania initially told the family that Yvonne had fallen from a high place. She claimed that she was not present during the incident and only learned about it afterwards. However, there were significant gaps in her account. She could not specify where the fall had taken place, when it had happened, or how Yvonne had been discovered. Her unclear story was already falling apart, and as more evidence emerged, her silence seemed less like confusion and more like she was hiding something. In a video that Stefania later deleted from social media, she said she was leaving a hotel in Cairo because she believed that a human trafficking ring was operating there. She claimed that she had been rescued and was now receiving threats, although she showed no visible injuries. Later, she gave a completely different version of what had happened. In this new statement, Stefania confirmed that she was with Yvonne when everything occurred. She mentioned both of them. As they were walking down the street, Jesse and two unidentified men were behind them. Stefania said that Yvonne began to panic and showed obvious signs of anxiety. Stefania tried to calm her down, but then, according to Stefania, Yvonne went ahead on her own to look for a safe place. Stefania said she took a taxi to try to catch up, but when she reached the spot where she expected to find Yvonne, Yvonne was no longer there. She said that was the moment when everything fell apart. Once again, nothing matched up. The timeline was unclear, and the locations were not specified. To make things even more confusing, Stefania later reported that Yvonne had been found with several broken bones. All of her belongings were still with her except for her passport, which was missing. Another warning sign, another unanswered question. Stefania said she felt completely broken, both emotionally and physically, as she tried to express how devastated she was. However, it was already too late to change what had happened. When those videos were released, social media erupted with activity. People began investigating the backgrounds of both Stefania and Jesse. Rumors circulated about Jesse. Some people accused her of being involved with human trafficking networks, while others claimed she had lived and worked in countries such as Germany and Turkey, specifically mentioning Ankara. Additionally, there were allegations that she had appeared on escort websites. At the same time, Stefania's name resurfaced in reports about her disagreements with Colombian brands, lingering issues from her participation in beauty pageants, and controversies within the modeling industry. Although none of these allegations were ever officially confirmed, rumors and speculation spread widely. As online pressure increased, both women made their social media profiles private, effectively bringing the case to a standstill. To this day, Yvonne's family has not received any clear or official updates from the Egyptian authorities or any government agency. No official communication has been made. This goes beyond negligence. It is outright abandonment. Many international reports warn that Egypt is a high-risk destination for women traveling alone. There are serious and increasing dangers, such as widespread gender-based violence and a largely hidden trafficking crisis. Refugees and migrants, particularly women, are vulnerable to exploitation. Yvonne, a Colombian woman far from home, found herself trapped in this dangerous situation. In Colombia, Yvonne's friends and family continue their fight. Their fundraiser is still ongoing. Although they have raised a substantial amount, it is still not enough to cover the significant expenses caused by this tragedy. Her family suffers from unbearable pain not knowing what happened to her in her final moments. Why do the people who were with her keep changing their stories? And why is no one, including the authorities, willing to tell the whole truth? This is one of the most unsettling cases we've discussed. A young woman died while overseas, and her friends either cannot or will not explain how it happened. The authorities are ignoring the situation. Governments remain silent, and life continues as usual. But her family cannot move on. They deserve honesty and clarity, not just rumors or conflicting information. They have a right to know the truth. They deserve justice in Yvonne Lore's case. Darlene Doskasil was born on November 2, 1974. As the middle daughter in a family of three, from an early age, she was recognized for her vibrant personality. Family and friends described her as radiant and ambitious, possessing both beauty and a warm heart. Although she never held a formal beauty title, her classmates and teachers fondly nicknamed her the Texas Beauty Queen. Darlene was voted prom queen, joined the Flag Corps, and was often the center of school activities. Her charm was genuine, making her loved by many. After graduating from CHO High School in Cameron in 1993, she enrolled at Texas State Technical College in Waco to train as a dental assistant, aspiring to become a nurse. During her college years, Darlene met Keith Gentry, who was born on September 2, 1974. In Waco, he cherished his family and community. Having two sisters and a tightly bonded extended family, he has a friendly and introverted personality, often preferring to stay out of the spotlight. Like Darlene, he attended Texas State Technical College, where he studied drafting and welding, eventually becoming an engineering assistant at a utility company. He is recognized for his hard work and responsibility, and he looks toward the future with family values. Darlene and Keith felt an immediate connection when they met and quickly fell in love. Their families welcomed each other, and everyone expected them to marry soon. However, after graduating in 1997 and considering their futures, Darlene found herself wanting a proposal, while Keith hesitated about marriage. After several discussions, they made the difficult choice to break up, leaving both families surprised and each of them heartbroken. Seeking a new beginning, Darlene relocated to Dallas, where she returned to dental work. However, she struggled with the city's fast-paced lifestyle. After experiencing a car theft and feeling isolated, she returned home after a year. And fate smiled upon her when she and Keith reconnected. Their reunion was touching. In 1990, Keith proposed to her, and they were married soon after. Everything seemed to fall into place as they bought their first house and began to live out their dreams. However, Darlene felt something was missing. Although she resumed her dental career, she realized her true passion lay in nursing. With Keith's full support, she decided to pursue a nursing degree. Together, they become a happy couple, sharing laughter, responsibilities, and life. By the early 2000s, Keith and Darlene enjoyed what seemed to be an ideal life in Robinson, Texas. Living just a short drive from Waco in a tranquil suburban neighborhood, they were neighbors to Keith's parents, which brought both comfort and complexity. Keith maintained his job as an engineering assistant, while Darlene worked as a registered nurse. With a stable income, they have built a comfortable life, are able to raise a family and enjoy luxuries. Family was central to their dreams. In 2001, their first son, Chase, was born, followed by Cody in 2004, and in 2005, they welcomed their third son, Cade. They seemed to embrace parenthood with ease. Supported by their families, they created a life filled with love, stability, and family traditions, becoming a model family, devoted parents, 3 lovely boys, and a well-maintained home. However, beneath this ideal image, their reality was much more complex. Keith's job often required travel, leaving Darlene to handle both work and home responsibilities alone. She managed the children, kept the household running, and fulfilled her duties as a nurse. Even when Keith was home, the division of labor did not improve much. He often returned home exhausted from his trips and wanting to rest instead of being involved in parenting. Aware that this was straining their marriage, Keith chose to leave his higher-paying, travel-heavy job for a lower-paying desk position that would keep him closer to home. This decision was made out of love and practicality, but it brought financial strain, and Keith soon felt trapped in a job that bored him. Frustration mounted. While Darlene's spending habits remained unchanged, she continued to maintain their pristine home, host gatherings, and purchase items that were now outside their budget. Money became a frequent source of conflict, with Keith feeling Darlene was reckless with their finances. As he took on more parenting responsibilities, and resentment grew, friends and family began noticing a shift in the once happy couple. who now seemed tense and emotionally distant. Despite the friction, neither Keith nor Darlene appeared to want a divorce. Keith, in particular, was committed to holding their family together. Then, on the morning of November 9, 2005, everything changed. At 6:11 a.m., a panicked Darlene called emergency services, her voice shaking as she described a disturbing scene. The back door of their home was wide open, and her husband Keith lay in bed, covered in blood and barely breathing. She mentioned that some of Keith's guns were missing and noted that he was gurgling, with pink foam coming from his mouth. Darlene insists she did not sleep next to Keith that night. Their youngest son, who was only 18 months old, was crying. She said she took him into a separate bedroom where her other two sons were sleeping and stayed there to help them fall asleep. She claims she woke up at 6:00 a.m. found the back door open, and discovered her husband gravely injured. Paramedics arrived soon after and found Keith still alive but in critical condition. He had been shot in the head and was unresponsive. The pink foam indicated severe trauma, suggesting he would likely not survive. He was quickly taken to Hillrest Baptist Medical Center in Waco and placed on life support. Despite medical efforts, Keith never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead on November 11, 2005. A homicide investigation began immediately, with detectives focusing on the only other adult in the home that night, Darlene. Her account became crucial to the investigation, and she was interviewed right away. Darlene told police that the evening of the 8th of November was uneventful at first. After a dinner and drinks with friends, she arrived home around 8:30 p.m. to an unwelcome atmosphere. Keith was upset after finding a restaurant receipt he considered another unnecessary expense. This heightened tension due to their financial struggles led to an argument. Frustrated, Darlene left the house to cool down. Upon returning later, she said she apologized and attempted to move on from their disagreement. Darlene reported that Keith went to bed in their master bedroom, while she remained with their three sons in another room. She was trying to comfort their youngest, who had been crying throughout the night. Darlene recalled waking briefly around 5:15 a.m. when she heard the dog bark, but she dismissed it. Thinking the dog often barked at nothing, she went back to sleep. At around 6:00 a.m., she got out of bed, walked through the house, and attempted to wake Keith for work. When he didn't respond, she entered the bedroom and found him unresponsive in bed, bleeding. She also noticed that the back door was wide open and that their locked gun cabinet had been disturbed, with its contents missing. Darlene's account suggested a horrifying scenario: an intruder had broken in, killed her husband, and stolen several firearms without leaving a trace. However, as the investigation continued, detectives identified inconsistencies in her story. Darlene claimed not to have checked on Keith until 6:00 a.m., but forensic evidence indicated that the shooting likely happened much earlier. The bullet's trajectory, blood pooling, and Keith's medical condition implied a prior attack. Further discrepancies emerged at the scene. Although Darlene mentioned that multiple guns were missing, investigators found several stacked neatly just outside the house. This behavior seemed inconsistent with that of a typical burglar. It appeared more like someone had deliberately placed the weapons there to stage the scene. Additionally, only Darlene and Keith had access to the gun cabinet, meaning whoever had opened it was familiar with its location and the hiding place of the key. This knowledge seemed implausible for a random intruder. Darlene's actions were also questionable. As a trained nurse, she had the skills to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation or check for life signs, yet she did neither. When paramedics arrived, she remained in the room with the children, claiming she was afraid for their safety. Investigators also found her 911 call unusual. Instead of sounding frantic, after discovering her husband shot, she was calm, providing a detailed account of her activities and sleeping arrangements. Her tone resembled that of someone attempting to deflect suspicion rather than a person in distress. Later that morning, Darlene participated in a formal police interview. However, when the questions became more direct, she hesitated and suddenly invoked her Fifth Amendment right, requesting a lawyer, which halted the interview. Despite this, Darlene insisted she had done nothing wrong, expressing her love for Keith and claiming their problems were normal and not severe enough to lead to violence. Nonetheless, investigators could not overlook the inconsistencies in her narrative. The evidence indicated a more personal and deliberate act than a random burglary. As detectives continued to probe, they raised questions about motive, access, and opportunity. Although Darlene displayed emotion in her statements, sometimes tearful and sometimes confused, her words failed to diminish the suspicions surrounding her. She talked about Keith's love for their children and affirmed her own love for him, but mere emotional displays were not enough. Authorities needed concrete evidence. With Darlene's consent, they conducted another search of her home. As anticipated, they found no signs of forced entry, but discovered something more damning: a pair of latex gloves concealed deep in the kitchen trash bin. Inside the gloves, they found a single-point, .22 caliber shell casing, traces of gunshot residue, and DNA matching only two people, Keith and Darlene. This was a significant breakthrough. They then uncovered a possible motive. Investigators learned that Keith had a life insurance policy worth between $500,000 and $750,000. For someone experiencing financial difficulties, this raised serious concerns about Darlene's intentions. 19 days after the shooting, on November 28, 2005, Darlene Gentry was arrested and charged with murder. However, she was released the same day when Keith's parents, who had stood by her, posted a $50,000 bond. They, along with her family, I couldn't believe that she was capable of such a crime. To them, she was not only Keith's wife, but also the mother of their grandchildren, someone they trusted and loved. Shortly after her release, new information came to light. Darlene contacted a local landowner, Robert Pavelka, expressing her interest in buying a rural property near Axtell, Texas. The land had a pond that reminded her of Keith's dream of taking their sons fishing. This seemed like a heartfelt tribute, but a few weeks later, Darlene made a strange request to Robert. She wanted him to fill in the pond. This abrupt change was concerning. Just weeks earlier, she had admired the pond as a memory of Keith. Now, she wanted it removed. Robert felt something was off and reported Darlene's request to the authorities. Detectives became suspicious that Darlene wanted the pond filled to hide something. They quickly organized a search and discovered a .22 caliber revolver at the bottom of the pond, which matched the shell casing found at the crime scene. Although the circumstantial evidence was compelling, investigators needed a direct link to prove her guilt. They asked Robert to help set a trap for Darlene, and he agreed. Pretending to go along with Darlene's request, Robert called her, saying he would drain the pond before filling it. The police hoped Darlene would try to retrieve any incriminating evidence if she thought the pond was being emptied. She fell for the trap. The next day, under concealed surveillance, she arrived at the property with wading boots and a fishing rod. She stepped into the water and began probing the pond bed in the exact spot where the authorities had found the gun. This incident was captured on video. With this evidence, detectives felt confident. In February 2007, Darlene Doscusier, 32, went on trial in McLennan County, Texas. The 5-day trial focused on the surveillance video of Darlene trying to recover the murder weapon days after it had been seized. This moment was critical in undermining her defense. Circumstantial evidence, including the gloves in the trash and the staged burglary, all pointed to her guilt. Darlene's defense team decided not to call any witnesses during the trial's innocence phase, relying instead on cross-examinations and procedural arguments, but they were unable to overcome the strong evidence against her. On February 8, 2007, Darlene Doscusier was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 60 years in prison. The prosecution presented her motives as emotional and financial, highlighting her desire to escape her marriage, seek freedom, and gain financial security through her husband Keith's life insurance. In their closing statements, the prosecutors cautioned the jury not to be misled by appearances. Darlene is currently being held at the Dr. Lane Murray Prison in Gatesville, Texas. In November 2017, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals rejected her appeal for a new trial, upholding her conviction. Official records indicate that she will be eligible for parole in February 2037, but if that is denied, she will have to serve her full sentence until February 2067. Darlene has consistently claimed her innocence. But the events of that November morning have had consequences beyond her imprisonment. In 2010, a judge awarded permanent custody of her 3 sons, Chase, Cody, and Cade, to Keith's parents, and she was issued a restraining order preventing any contact with them. Consequently, she has not spoken to her sons since then. Keith Gentry was known for his quiet strength. He was a devoted father, loyal husband, and diligent provider who prioritized family and stability over ambition and status. He left behind 3 young boys, a grieving family, and a legacy of integrity and love. Although his life was tragically cut short, those who knew him remember him for the way he lived, rather than how he died. His memory lives on in the hearts of his family, friends, and especially in the lives of his beloved sons. In 2014, Albert Stauch met Letitia Harden while he was going through a tough divorce from his first wife, Landon Bullard. Albert and Landon had 2 young children. Gannon Stauch is born in 2009, and Lena Stauch, born in 2012. As their marriage fell apart, Albert looked for comfort and company outside of the relationship. Letitia, formerly married to a man named Hunt, is the mother of Harley Hunt. She moved to Colorado from South Carolina and works as an elementary school teacher for special needs children. Letitia has a long criminal history of over 20 years. In 2001, she committed her first felony, which was car theft. However, she had been engaging in dishonest behavior since high school, such as making a fake bomb threat. Albert and Letitia seemed very compatible when they began dating. Letitia presented herself as a devout Christian with beliefs and values similar to Albert's. Albert, a full-time member of the Army National Guard, was drawn to her strong faith and her commitment to working with children. She also gave the impression that she would be a loving and supportive stepmother to his children, promising to treat them as her own. Letitia appeared understanding of the demands of Albert's military career. He particularly appreciated her stability in her career as a teacher, knowing from his own military upbringing the importance of having a strong and capable partner. Letitia expressed admiration for Albert's faith and family values. He felt confident in their shared beliefs. Albert and Letitia seemed happy together, looking forward to building a blended family. But hidden from view, problems were brewing. Letitia's background was more complex than she let on. In South Carolina, she lost her job at a school and had her teaching license suspended because she quit without giving proper notice. She said she was harassed and retaliated against, claiming the school district superintendent's niece was her husband's ex-wife. But she never proved these claims. Sources revealed that she had been fired from her last 3 teaching positions, suggesting a pattern of issues at work and a lack of job stability. Albert proposed to Letitia, even though they had only known each other for under a year. He believed she would be a good partner in raising his children and creating a secure family life. They married in January 2015. A little over a year after Letitia's divorce from her first husband, their wedding suggested a new beginning for both of them and their families. At first, Gannon and Lena stayed mostly with their mother, Landon, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Their stepmother, Letitia, it was working on getting to know them. The children spent holidays and summers at both their mother's and father's homes, which was stressful for everyone. Meanwhile, Landon married Mike Hiot and was expecting her 3rd child, a daughter named Nova. Over time, Albert became more and more worried about his children's safety when they were at their mother's house. He suspected that banned substances were involved, likely due to Mike's actions and way of life. Because of these worries, and because he wanted to have his children live closer to him, Albert decided to ask for more custody time with Gannon and Lena. Letitia seemed to support this idea and acted like she was looking forward to being more involved in the children's lives. The family had moved several times because of Albert's military orders, which made their relationship more difficult. Letitia wanted to spend more money than they had, which caused a lot of arguments with Albert. She was tired of moving so often and of taking care of Albert's children. Later, investigators would find out that Letitia's real feelings about being a stepmother were much more complex than she showed. Although she pretended to be a loving stepmother in public, evidence would later show that she deeply resented her stepchildren, especially Gannon. She had started to see him as a problem instead of a child she once said she loved like her own. On January 27, 2020, shortly before 7:00 p.m., the El Paso County Sheriff's Office received a call reporting 11-year-old Gannon Stouch missing. The call came from Letitia, who lived with him on the Colorado Springs. Letitia stated that Gannon had left home between 3:15 p.m. and 4:00 p.m. to visit a friend but hadn't come back. She also said that Gannon's father, Albert, was away in Oklahoma for military training, leaving her in charge of Gannon and his younger sister. At 7:32 p.m., Gannon was officially listed as a runaway in state and national databases. Letitia was told to call the non-emergency number to give a more complete report. When she spoke with an investigator, the investigator quickly found problems with her story. Letitia couldn't name any of Gannon's friends or their parents, and she didn't know where any of these friends lived. This worried the experienced officers who had worked on many missing child cases. Caregivers usually know basic information about a child's friends, especially for an 11-year-old. Deputies with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office arrived at the Stouch home around 10:00 p.m. That evening, the officers found Letitia presenting herself as a concerned stepmother, but her behavior struck them as odd from the beginning. She seemed more focused on controlling the narrative than on the urgent need to find a missing 11-year-old child. Her unease grew as she attempted to maintain her story while fielding questions from experienced investigators. On January 28, 2020, at 12:29 p.m., the El Paso County Sheriff's Office took over the case. Detectives began interviewing people, gathering surveillance video, and pursuing leads right away. People who knew Gannon, like his family, were worried when he was first labeled a runaway. They didn't think he would ever leave home without asking. On January 30, 2020, 3 days after the initial missing person report, authorities changed Gannon's case from a runaway to an endangered missing child case. This change showed that investigators were very worried about what might have happened to him. The El Paso County Sheriff's Office asked the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the FBI Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team for help. This escalation highlighted how seriously law enforcement was taking the case and their increasing belief that something much worse than a runaway situation had taken place. On the 31st of January, 2020, Letitia Stouch spoke exclusively to local news reporter, presenting herself as a devastated stepmother, desperate to find her missing stepson. To those who didn't know the family well, she appeared genuinely concerned, but investigators were growing increasingly suspicious of her behavior and her constantly changing story. On February 3, 2020, a neighbor's home surveillance video provided a significant break in the case. The video, recorded on the day Gannon went missing, shows Letitia and Gannon leaving the house together at around 10:15 a.m. on January 27. Then, around 2:19 p.m., only Letitia is seen returning home. This video evidence severely undermined Letitia's story, changing the course of the investigation. Investigators now had proof that Letitia was the last person to see Gannon alive, and that her version of events was untrue. The search for Gannon became one of the largest missing child investigations in Colorado's history. Hundreds of tips poured in from the community, leading to thousands of hours dedicated to the investigation. Search teams used drones, search dogs, horses, helicopters, and divers to explore areas in and around Colorado Springs. Volunteers from the community dedicated numerous hours to the search. Gannon's parents, Albert and Landon, made emotional public appeals for his return and expressed their gratitude for the community's support. Throughout this massive search effort, Letitia maintained a deceptive facade, even participating in some of the search operations. As the investigation continued, Letitia's account changed significantly, and often, each new version of her story was more detailed and less believable than the previous one. On February 2, 2020, she told Albert that a man broke into their house, abused her, attacked her, and kidnapped Gannon. When Albert questioned the lack of any sign of a struggle, she claimed she had cleaned the scene out of fear. Investigators looked into Letitia's online activity and found troubling information that suggested her mental state was not what she showed to others. Her internet searches provided important clues about her reasons and plans. An intelligence analyst testified that Letitia's phone usage on the day Gannon disappeared was very strange. Usually, she used her phone often, but on the 27th of January, her phone was inactive for long stretches. This lack of phone activity matched the time when investigators believed the crime happened. The investigation also revealed that Leticia had conducted searches about when a body starts to decompose, how to pass fake polygraph tests, and, most disturbingly, searches specifically about "I hate my stepson." These digital breadcrumbs painted a picture of someone who harbored deep resentment toward Gannon and was actively planning something sinister. On March 2, 2020, Leticia Stauch was arrested in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She was charged with the first-degree murder of a child and child abuse that resulted in death, tampering with a dead body, and tampering with evidence. The arrest came after weeks of investigation, which included evidence linking her to Gannon's disappearance and presumed death. While being transported back to Colorado, Leticia reportedly attacked a deputy. This act of violence supported the investigators' belief that she was capable of violence in her unstable behavior. Following Letitia's arrest, Albert filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The divorce proceedings marked the tragic end of the Stauch family's marriage. On the 17th of March, 2020, bridge inspectors in Pace, Florida, discovered a suitcase containing what appeared to be a boy's body wrapped in blankets, over 1,300 miles from Gannon's home in Colorado. The scene was gruesome and heartbreaking. The remains were in an advanced state of decomposition. The decomposing body, still wearing the same clothes Gannon was wearing at the time of his death, was wrapped in his own bedsheets and placed in a suitcase. On the 20th of March, 2020, law enforcement confirmed the remains as those of Gannon Stauch, bringing the search to a tragic close. The discovery of his body so far from home raised questions about Leticia's transportation methods and the planning involved in the cover-up. The autopsy of Gannon revealed the brutality of Leticia's actions. Gannon suffered 18 stab wounds and 4 blunt force injuries to his head, suggesting a beating. Most critically, Gannon was shot with a pistol, severing his spinal cord. The medical examiner testified that these injuries were deliberately inflicted and caused his death. Some wounds appeared to be defensive, suggesting Gannon fought back. The attack focused on his upper body, head, and chest. The autopsy also revealed that Gannon had been given hydrocodone, a prescription medication belonging to Albert, before the attack. This suggested that Leticia may have drugged him to make him more vulnerable. Following the discovery of Gannon's body and the completion of the autopsy, investigators were able to piece together Leticia's crimes and her attempts to conceal them. She had transported his body to multiple locations before ultimately taking it to Florida. Evidence recovered from her electronic devices revealed premeditation and a pattern of deception. This included searches for information on how to fake polygraph results. The investigation also revealed that she rented vehicles and made numerous trips to dispose of evidence and relocate Gannon's body. After years of legal proceedings, Leticia Stauch's trial began in March 2023. She pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming she suffered from dissociative identity disorder stemming from childhood abuse. The defense argued that Leticia had suffered a psychotic episode due to childhood trauma. Based on testimony from psychiatrist Dorothy Otno Lewis, Leticia also made unsubstantiated accusations against Albert, alleging his involvement in Gannon's death. These claims were dismissed by the court as unfounded. On May 8, 2023, a jury found Leticia Stauch guilty on all charges after deliberating for almost 8 hours. The jury did not accept her claim of insanity. Before the sentencing, Gannon's parents gave emotional statements about how the crime affected them. Gannon's mother, Landon, said she hoped to never see Leticia again. Gannon's father, Albert, asked the judge to remove Leticia's last name so she would not be associated with their family. Judge Gregory Werner addressed Leticia directly. He said, "He can say without hesitation that the facts in this case are the most horrific he have ever seen. Leticia's conduct in this case demands the maximum punishment that he can impose under Colorado law." On the same day, Leticia Stouch was sentenced by Judge Gregory Werner to life in prison without parole plus 156 years. Judge Werner offered words of compassion to Gannon's family. He said that he could not fathom the pain Albert and Landon had experienced as a result of Leticia's actions. He also addressed Leticia directly, stating that she had betrayed the person she loved enough to marry. He added that she had told her husband lies and taken away someone he loved. Gannon Stouch's death is a heartbreaking example of how evil can be concealed by those we trust. This 11-year-old, who enjoyed video games, basketball, and family time, was tragically murdered by someone who should have protected him. Cassidy Rainwater was born on June 9, 1988, making her 33 years old in 2021. She was raised in Lebanon, Missouri, by her parents, Clifford and Tracy, along with her 3 brothers and sister. She was known for her cheerful and outgoing personality. She developed a love for poetry and singing at a young age and considered herself a typical country girl. She met the father of her first child, Ben, in high school, and shortly after graduating, she became pregnant. Their relationship was troubled, and they soon separated. At 17, Cassidy took legal action against Ben for child support, which he provided. However, she ultimately felt unprepared to be a mother and decided to place the child for adoption. Approximately a year later, tragedy struck her family when her mother, Tracy, went missing. Tracy had a hobby of collecting arrowheads in a nearby field and disappeared one day in April 2007 during one of her searches. For a year, the family lived in uncertainty, and the police could not determine Tracy's whereabouts. In May 2008, a farmer spreading fertilizer in a nearby field discovered shoes and human bones, later confirmed to be Tracy's. This news devastated Cassidy. The circumstances surrounding her mother's disappearance and death raised many questions, especially because she had remained unfound for an entire year. Many believe that if the police had conducted a more thorough investigation, Tracy might have been located sooner. To this day, the mystery of Tracy's fate remains unresolved. After enduring this loss, Cassidy gradually overcame her depression. Over the next decade, she had 5 more children with different men. Although her life was often unstable, she loved her children deeply and was committed to doing everything she could for them. Later, she married Zachary, the father of one of her children, in a local church. However, by 2021, they had separated. Cassidy faced significant challenges raising her 5 children alone, especially with financial struggles. In early 2021, she met a man named James Phelps and began visiting his cabin in the woods frequently. Then, in July 2021, Cassidy disappeared, echoing her mother's earlier fate. James Phelps was born in 1963 in Urbana, Missouri, a small town with a population of around 400 people, surrounded by forests. Children in the area spent much of their time outdoors, as there were few other activities available. James was a top student in high school and later enlisted in the Army. At 30, he married and moved to St. Louis with his wife. After his mother passed away in 2010, he returned to Urbana, inheriting his parents' home, but his marriage had ended. In 2019, at age 56, James became an ordained minister in the Universal Life Church and settled in a remote area outside Lebanon. His home was an isolated cabin in the woods, which could not be found on maps. With no neighbors nearby, it was difficult for people to know what he was doing in his private space. To reach James's property, visitors had to pass through a field filled with abandoned cars, some of which had been there for over a decade. Slowly rusting and becoming overtaken by grass and bushes, the setting appeared wild and eerie, resembling a scene from a horror movie. In 2019, another resident of the cabin, Timothy Norton, was living there as well. Born in 1965, Timothy grew up in the same town as James, and they were friends. Despite a slight age difference, after high school, Timothy followed James into the Marine Corps, He married a 17-year-old girl when he was 23. But after leaving the service, he struggled to find his path and began engaging in petty crimes, leading to a conviction for assault in the 1992nd. One day, Timothy had a reckless idea to start a forest fire by pouring gasoline on grass. It's unclear what prompted this decision, but it led to disastrous consequences. The gasoline canister ignited, causing an explosion that sent him to the hospital with severe burns. This incident signaled the start of his downward spiral. He went through a divorce, remarried, and then fell into a troubled lifestyle. Timothy neglected his personal hygiene completely. He stopped showering, which was evident from his greasy, unkempt, long hair. He developed a peculiar habit of wearing military boots constantly, even while sleeping, resulting in a noticeable odor. His living conditions were appalling, with his trailer resembling a dump and the floor completely covered in dog feces. During this time, he became heavily involved in banned substances and began cheating on his wife. Shockingly, he found women willing to be with him until one day, his wife discovered him with another woman in their bed, leading to another divorce. In his 52nd, Timothy moved in with his childhood friend, James Phelps, in a secluded cabin in the woods. In 2021, while Timothy was 56 and James was 58, they became fascinated with the dark web, a hidden part of the internet only accessible through specific software, known for its encryption and anonymity. The platform is notorious for hosting illegal activities and offensive content. Timothy and James spent extensive hours exploring questionable websites on the dark web and became members of online communities, creating new identities. They were primarily drawn to adult content, much of which involved non-consensual acts, and were particularly interested in violent and exploitative scenes, including ones involving minors. They even saved some videos on their hard drives for repeated viewing. It is important to note that James is a church pastor. He has created a profile on an adult website where he expresses specific intimate interests and appears to be looking for someone to dominate. However, he had no success finding anyone. Additionally, individuals with criminal backgrounds occasionally stayed with James and Timothy, reflecting their disturbing social circle. James and Timothy grew so close that they considered each other brothers. Their activities on the dark web were already alarming, but they soon decided to act on their dark fantasies. Their main desire was to have a woman who would obey them completely. They began planning how to lure a stranger to their forest cabin, brainstorming ways to achieve this. They needed someone vulnerable, like a teenager aged 12 to 14, to make it easier to deceive her. However, they realized that abducting a minor could lead to significant legal trouble. Instead, they focused on finding a woman they found appealing. They initially searched social media and local supermarkets, but their attempts to target women were unsuccessful. Then, James met a woman named Cassidy Rainwater. With this connection, her fate was sealed. Cassidy, a mother who could not afford housing, temporarily left her children with relatives and moved in with James. For Timothy and James, Cassidy represented the vulnerable young woman they were seeking. After James took her in, she mysteriously disappeared, and no one heard from her again. Cassidy's family was not too worried when she went missing at first. They thought she might be looking for work. However, after a month, relatives began to worry. Although Cassidy might have disappeared for short periods of time in the past, she always kept in touch with her children and did not cause the family any concern. On August 25, 2021, Cassidy's aunt, Cora, who was caring for one of Cassidy's children, contacted the police to report her niece missing. What happened to her? Where did she go all that time? James and Timothy decided to fulfill their twisted fantasies by kidnapping Cassidy. They locked her in a large metal cage at a forest cabin. It is believed they had prepared the cage in advance, as they had premeditated the abduction. The duration of Cassidy's captivity in the cage is unclear. They photographed her while one assaulted her, and the other recorded it, intending to post the images online. The photos revealed Cassidy's injuries, her terrified expression, and her desperate condition. James and Timothy were active in various dark web communities, sharing photos and detailing their actions with Cassidy. Previously satisfied with consuming adult content, They now became creators of their own disturbing material. Some images suggested that they took turns assaulting her while she was confined to the cage. Occasionally, they would let her out, fantasizing about her as a maid who would obey their commands before returning her to the cage like an animal. This situation raises many unsettling questions about the extent of Cassidy's suffering during her captivity. Beyond James and Timothy, other criminals occasionally visited the cabin, possibly joining in on the abuse. On August 25, 2021, when Cora reported Cassidy's disappearance, police inquired about anyone Cassidy had been in contact with. Cora mentions James, and on the 25th of July, that was the last day she saw her niece. The police arrived at the cabin to interview James. When they knocked on the door, he quickly opened it and showed his innocence. He answered all their questions politely and seemed cooperative. He claimed Cassidy had stayed with him briefly until she left in the middle of the night on July 25, getting into a car parked nearby. He suggested she was headed to Colorado, as she had mentioned wanting to go there. The police found no reason to doubt James at that moment. They conducted a superficial search of the property, but found no evidence of Cassidy's presence. They thanked him for his time and left. It seems the police overlooked the metal cage on the property. Otherwise, they would have raised questions. For a week, law enforcement searched the area, but found nothing, allowing James and Timothy to hide Cassidy's abduction. As days passed without any breakthroughs, the investigation stalled, and the detectives were left without leads. It appeared that James and Timothy might escape the consequences of their actions. However, the situation soon took a turn. On September 16, 2021, the FBI received an anonymous tip about images on the dark web featuring a half-naked woman in chains, confined in a large metal cage with a mechanical hoist used for processing game. The FBI promptly investigated these images, first confirming their authenticity, then working to identify the woman depicted. Experts reviewed missing persons reports, estimated when and where the photos were taken, and tried to gather more information. Remarkably, the FBI found a match with Cassidy Rainwater's case. They compared her photos to the images from the dark web and confirmed that Cassidy was the woman shown in the metal cage. The FBI then contacted the local sheriff's office to report their finding. Police felt the need to check James's home again because the images matched the layout of his backyard. They quickly obtained a search warrant for both the house and James's electronic devices. When they arrived at the scene, they seized James's cell phone and found about a dozen images of Cassidy, the same images that were being shared on the dark web. This evidence was sufficient for them to arrest James immediately. However, the situation worsened during their search of the property. Officers found meat hooks hanging from the ceiling and a large freezer placed beneath them. Fearing what they might find inside, they opened the freezer, revealing several packages containing what appeared to be human remains. Each package was labeled with a freezing date and a body part, with one dated the 24th of July. Some remains were even vacuum sealed, indicating significant effort had been made in their preparation. When officers asked James if the remains were human, he smirked and claimed to have served his neighbor barbecued human ribs the day before. Despite these alarming findings, the police still held out hope of finding Cassidy alive, since the remains did not yet confirm her death. They sent the freezer's contents for analysis to determine if they were human, and attempted to question James further about Cassidy's whereabouts, but he refused to cooperate. Consequently, they decided to interrogate Timothy, who lived with James in the forest cabin. Timothy, too, declined to provide any information. The police awaited DNA testing results for the suspected human remains, a process that could take up to 30 days. Meanwhile, speculation ran rampant online after James and Timothy were arrested on kidnapping charges, which prompted the sheriff's office to withhold further details due to the severity of the case. Law enforcement also condemned both bloggers and local journalists for spreading rumors, which were circulating widely in the community and on social media. Reports emerged about the possible human remains found in the cabin, shared by James and Timothy. This was the only information released to the public, which led to rampant speculation that James and Timothy were serial killers. The way the remains were packaged and dismembered suggested that they had considerable experience, leading many to believe they lured women to their cabin, tortured them in a metal cage, posted images online, and then killed and sold the meat. Although this theory sounded implausible, it explained the vacuum packaging and labeling. A local resident even claimed to have discovered human skin hanging from a tree, which further intensified rumors about James and Timothy. As speculation escalated, people began to connect James and Timothy to a criminal organization targeting women. There is some truth to this theory, as there are records of several individuals convicted of abuse related to the cabin in the woods where the two friends lived. The small town was abuzz with gossip about the horrific incidents. These speculations remained unverified, leaving many questions unanswered. The local sheriff expressed his frustration, urging people not to discuss unconfirmed theories and denouncing them as fake news. 2 weeks after human remains were found in James's house, both he and Timothy were still in custody, awaiting DNA analysis results. When a significant event occurred, the forest cabin where they were found burned to the ground unexpectedly in the middle of the night. Many items of evidence had yet to be collected and were destroyed in the fire. Authorities were puzzled about the cause of the fire and began an investigation, which revealed it was intentionally set. During this inquiry, they discovered a tripwire linked to an explosive device within the house. To ensure safety, a bomb squad was called in to deactivate the device. It appeared that someone had deliberately used the explosive to hasten the fire. Since James and Timothy were in custody, they were not directly involved, but it's likely they orchestrated the fire through someone else. This incident intensified suspicions of a criminal gang operating in the area. Could these individuals be tied to Cassidy's disappearance? What were they trying to conceal by burning the cabin? What evidence did they hope to destroy? As these questions grew, Cassidy's family held on to hope for her safe return and prayed for her to reach out, which sadly never happened. In November 2021, 6 weeks after James and Timothy's arrest, the family received heartbreaking news. The remains found in the freezer belonged to Cassidy Rainwater. Additionally, before the fire, over 200 pieces of evidence related to Cassidy, including blood traces and DNA samples, were discovered in the house. Authorities had to inform Cassidy's family that she had died at 33, leaving behind 6 children. Initially, James and Timothy were charged only with kidnapping, but murder charges were later added. The police intensified their interrogation, determined to gain a confession. Eventually, Timothy confessed and revealed the truth about Cassidy's fate. One summer evening, James woke Timothy, who was sleeping in his truck, and asked for help dealing with Cassidy, who was inside the house. Still unaware of the danger, the day before, they had released her from a cage. They returned to the cabin, where James approached the sleeping Cassidy and began to strangle her while instructing Timothy to keep her immobilized. Timothy held Cassidy's legs as James squeezed her throat. James then placed a plastic bag over Cassidy's head, suffocating her. Unfortunately, Cassidy died. While Timothy confessed to their actions, the details about what they did to Cassidy while she was captive remain unknown, leaving questions about the torment she suffered in isolation in the forest. After Cassidy died, James asked Timothy to help move her body outside and tie it to a nearby metal structure. Then, he began handling the girl's body, a terrifying action that left blood everywhere. Timothy appeared shocked by James's actions but did not intervene. James then asked Timothy to throw her body in the bathtub. Timothy complied without protest. Over the next few days, James processed what remained of Cassidy, vacuum-sealed the parts, labeled them, and stored them in the freezer, where police later found them. This account came from Timothy, who may not be seen as a trustworthy source, leaving some uncertainty about the details of the event. Following this confession, Timothy and James were set to stand trial for their crimes. Initially, both men pleaded not guilty, prolonging the trial, but eventually changed their pleas as they recognized their slim chances of acquittal and the possibility of facing the death penalty if found guilty by a jury. In 2023, James entered into an offered plea agreement. This is a form of guilty plea in which the defendant does not admit guilt, but acknowledges that the prosecution's evidence is strong enough to warrant a conviction. Therefore, he accepts the sentence as if he had actually pleaded guilty. This allows the defendant to accept the charges and potentially receive a lighter sentence without admitting guilt. Timothy also pleaded guilty and both he and James accepted plea deals to avoid receiving the death penalty. Instead, they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cassidy Rainwater's family had to endure a painful 3-year wait to have her remains returned so they could finally give her a proper burial, which was the last wish of her children. They wanted a place to visit and remember their beloved mother. Losing their mother at such a young age caused immense emotional distress for Cassidy's children. The youngest daughter needed to see a psychologist due to persistent nightmares following their mother's death. The older siblings faced bullying at school when details about Cassidy's death became public, experiencing teasing and humiliation. However, Cassidy's children remember her as a remarkable person, hardworking and loving, and they take pride in her memory. During the funeral, the eldest son expressed that their mother had worked tirelessly to provide them with the best life possible. Cassidy Rainwater was more than just a name in the news or a topic for discussion. She was a real person who was deeply loved by many. She lived her life to the fullest. Because James Phelps and Timothy Norton accepted plea deals, there was no trial, and many facts and pieces of evidence in the case were never disclosed. If they hadn't shared Cassidy's images on the dark web, they might have escaped justice entirely. The only consolation is that these individuals, who acted inhumanely, are now behind bars where they belong. In South Dublin, in the Mountain View Park neighborhood, was a modest house. Living there is Louise's family. Patricia O'Connor, Louise's mother, a retired hospital care assistant, had worked at the city hospital her entire career. She was strict, reserved, and tired from life's challenges. She bought their house with her own savings. It was the house where she raised her family and lived most of her life. After divorcing her husband, Augustin, Patricia moved out and lived separately for a while in a new relationship. When that relationship ended and she had nowhere else to live, she returned home. Augustine allowed her to move back in. Although divorced, they lived together like distant roommates, rarely speaking but sharing the same house. Augustine, known to everyone as a quiet and withdrawn man, he rarely participated in household responsibilities or involved himself in arguments. His indifference suited some, but it only deepened the already strained atmosphere in the home. Patricia and her daughter, Louise, had a difficult relationship. Louise, who lived with Patricia, had 5 children, each with a different father. Louise didn't have a job. I didn't help with household chores, and often argued with her mother, Stefania. Louise's teenage daughter tended to be quiet and withdrawn. Louise's other, younger children didn't participate in the family conflicts, but they were exposed to the stressful atmosphere. Also living in the home was Kieran Green, Louise's current partner. He was unemployed, moody, and often acted aggressively and rudely. He constantly clashed with Patricia. He ignored her rules, avoided chores, and gave off a vibe she simply didn't trust. Their relationship had been cold and tense from the very beginning. On top of the full-time residence, the house often saw visits from Keith Johnston, Louise's former partner and father of her 2 eldest children. Patricia lived with her ex-husband, their adult daughter, 5 grandchildren, her daughter's partner, and a former son-in-law. Although she was older, Patricia did almost all the housework herself, including cooking, cleaning, and managing the household. The others, including Augustine, Louise, and Kieran, rarely helped and seemed to expect her to do everything. As a result, the house was crowded, loud, and difficult for Patricia to maintain. Over time, Patricia began to feel like she was losing her grip on the household. No one listened to her anymore. Her requests were ignored, and any effort to assert boundaries was met with eye rolls or irritation. The house she had once built and maintained now seemed to reject her presence. Although no one said it aloud, Patricia sensed she no longer had a place there. The first warning sign was that Patricia was quietly being excluded. No one wanted to change the existing situation, but they also didn't want to follow anyone else's rules. Patricia's expectations were reasonable. She just wanted basic respect. such as cleaning up after themselves, not leaving dirty dishes around, putting away their belongings, and sticking to a daily routine. Instead, she was met with silence, avoidance, and subtle hostility. The other adults didn't take Patricia seriously. They dismissed her reminders as nagging, something they put up with but didn't respect. Kieran, in particular, avoided her and acted like he couldn't hear her. Even when she spoke directly to him, Louise never helped. When things got difficult, Louise would either become emotionally distant or accuse Patricia of being too strict. Patricia had no one to depend on. As a result, the house was usually messy, and Patricia felt like she was the only one who cared. She tried to keep a daily schedule, but no one else followed it. Patricia would wake up early to make breakfast, wash clothes, and take care of the yard. The others slept late, made messes, and didn't respect her efforts to keep things organized. Even the younger children seemed to realize that rules didn't matter in the house. The family had fallen apart. Each person lived separately, ignoring everyone else's needs. They didn't talk, share their day, or discuss their feelings. Their home, once a place that united them, was now just a collection of isolated individuals. May 29, 2017, seemed like an ordinary day. There were no fights, no emergency calls, and no one reported hearing any shouting. However, on that day, Patricia O'Connor, 61, stopped leaving her home. She also stopped answering her phone and stopped going to her usual places. Even though these changes were sudden, her close friends and family didn't seem worried about her disappearance. Valeria, Patricia's sister, was the first to suspect something was wrong. A few days after Patricia's disappearance, Valerie met Augustin while walking her dog near the house. Augustin mentioned that Patricia had left with a suitcase on the evening of May 29th and hadn't come back. He also said that Kieran and Richard, Patricia's son, had already reported her missing to the police. Valerie found this explanation suspicious. She knew Patricia well and believed she would never leave without telling anyone, especially since it meant abandoning her grandchildren. Patricia had never disappeared before, always stayed in contact, and wasn't prone to impulsive decisions. Once authorities in Ireland received the missing person report, they followed standard protocol, checking hospitals, hotels, and local shelters. But every lead came up empty. Patricia's bank card hadn't been used, no calls had been made from her phone, and there was no trace of her movements after the time she was said to have left. Not a single sighting, nothing. The police asked Louise for a photo of her mother to issue a public appeal. This was the first time anyone outside of Louise's immediate family learned that Patricia was missing. Before this, the family had kept Patricia's disappearance a secret. The situation was strange. Patricia was gone, but no one seemed worried. No one had started a search. Concerned relatives living elsewhere in Ireland took action. They called each other, reached out to friends and people in the area, and contacted the media. But they found nothing. No one had seen Patricia. They looked into her routines and tried to guess where she might have gone, but they found no clues. Nearly a week passed. The house she was said to have left hadn't been searched. No signs of forced entry. No police reports about threats or aggression. Based on the limited information available, there wasn't enough to formally classify her disappearance as suspicious, but there also wasn't anything to support the idea that she had left of her own will. At that point, investigators started to doubt the family story. They couldn't establish exactly when Patricia supposedly left. The investigation's initial progress was slow due to a lack of concrete evidence and limited cooperation from Patricia's close relatives. The case, which initially appeared to be a simple missing person case, began to seem more complex, suggesting hidden issues. The O'Connor family knew their house was being watched by surveillance cameras on a building next door, which recorded their front and backyards. After Patricia O'Connor was reported missing, police reviewed this footage and made a surprising discovery. On May 29th, around 9:34 a.m., the cameras recorded a woman leaving the house with a suitcase. She walked away and returned about 30 minutes later, approaching from a different direction. At first, it looked like someone going on a trip. However, the police realized the woman wasn't Patricia O'Connor. It was her granddaughter, Stefania. Disguised in Patricia's clothes, Stephanie appeared to be acting cautiously. as if she didn't want to be noticed. The actions were planned in advance. A neighbor's security camera showed that it wasn't just a failed attempt to make it look like Patricia left willingly. It showed that several family members worked together. Stephanie coming back through the backyard was important evidence. Their aim was to make authorities believe Patricia left by herself, to prevent them from searching the house right away. After reviewing the recordings again, investigators confirmed Patricia remained at home both on and before May 29th. They also discovered that someone in the house used her phone after that date to send messages that made it seem like she was traveling. This detail was initially kept secret, but was later included in the obstruction of justice charges. Everyone in the house participated in the lie. Stephanie told the police Patricia had left. Louise gave them a photo and supported Stephanie's story. Augustin also repeated the story, seeming completely certain. Even though none of them had seen Patricia that day, they all told the same story without questioning it. This united silence and consistent story became a defining part of their actions. Investigators noted contradictions in the statements. Louise claimed her mother's departure was not surprising and mentioned past tensions. Without being able to recall a single specific incident, Augustin said Patricia had talked about leaving, but he had no idea where she would have gone. Stephanie cited a stressful environment in the house as a possible reason. Furthermore, other elements didn't add up. There was no indication that Patricia had packed her bags to leave. All her belongings, clothes, medications, personal papers, and a bank card were intact, directly contradicting the story of her supposedly planned departure. None of the neighbors had seen her leave. There were no taxis, no buses, and not even a passerby who could confirm her departure. The lies fell apart quickly. Once Patricia was reported missing and the police asked for the public's help, people started sharing information. Witnesses said Kieran and Louise behaved strangely. They avoided talking to people, didn't ask for help, and seemed unconcerned. This suggested a disturbing truth: Patricia didn't disappear by herself. From the beginning, it was obvious that her disappearance was planned to hide something much worse. On June 10, 2017, a family was finishing a picnic in County Wicklow, Ireland, along the military road. As they were packing up, they searched for a lost item in the overgrown area beside the road. One of them noticed something odd in the tall grass and bushes. At first, they thought it was an animal carcass, but they soon realized, with horror, that it was part of a human body. They immediately called the police. What followed was a massive, coordinated operation. The area was secured, military units and defense personnel were brought in, along with aerial support. Over the next several days, multiple body fragments were discovered, scattered along the roadside. In total, more than 100 personnel were involved. Investigators found remains at 9 separate locations along a stretch of roughly 15 miles. Initially, identifying the remains was impossible. Authorities first thought the body was male based on its structure, but this changed as more pieces were found. Forensic examiners later determined the victim was a woman over 60 years old. However, they couldn't immediately match her to any missing person cases. No identifying documents, clothing, or personal items were found with the remains, complicating the identification process. The body parts were wrapped in separate plastic bags because there was little animal activity or decay. Investigators believe the body was dismembered and disposed of within the previous 24 hours. Meanwhile, in Dublin, the search for Patricia O'Connor continued while forensic testing of the remains was still pending. No one had yet linked the two cases, and police were still pursuing the theory that Patricia had voluntarily disappeared. 3 days later, on June 12, 2017, the case took a significant turn when Kieran Green arrived at a police station. His behavior was immediately suspicious. He appeared nervous, spoke quickly, and often made contradictory statements. He identified himself as Louise O'Connor's partner and confessed to killing Louise's mother, Patricia. However, he insisted it was self-defense. He stated that he and Patricia had argued, and the argument turned physical. According to Kieran, Patricia entered the bathroom while he was showering, shouted at him, and wielded a wooden stick. He claimed he pushed her, causing her to fall, hit her head, and lose consciousness. Panicked, he confessed that he put her body in a car and drove to the countryside. There, he buried her in a shallow grave. He later said that he went back a few days afterward, dug up the body, cut it into pieces, and spread the remains in different isolated spots in the Wicklow Mountains. He claimed he did this to make it impossible to discover what he had done. He maintained that he acted alone and told no one about it. He claimed the events were spontaneous, but evidence suggested otherwise. The body parts were found in heavy-duty plastic bags and hidden in remote locations, indicating planning. Forensic analysis revealed multiple skull injuries inconsistent with a single fall. The cuts, some clean and showing motorized saw patterns, proved the body was dismembered and moved after an initial burial. This required tools, effort, and planning, suggesting a deliberate act rather than a spontaneous reaction. Kieran's confession became the starting point for a much broader investigation. Attention turned not just to him, but to everyone who had been present in the home in the days leading up to Patricia's disappearance. The incident was no longer viewed as a tragic accident. Details suggested the involvement of multiple individuals in a coordinated effort to cover up a serious crime. The police started checking local hardware stores for purchases related to the crime. They asked for security camera footage and sales records, particularly those involving Kieran's family or friends. Investigators also started looking more closely at the actions of the other people living in the house. Stephanie had been seen on video wearing Patricia's clothes, which had initially been dismissed as a game. Now, this was being seriously investigated as a possible attempt to deceive the police. Louise's behavior was also being questioned. She knew about the conflict between her mother and her partner, but had not intervened. Her previous statements were now considered incomplete and sometimes inconsistent. The next step in the investigation was to look for connections between Kieran and other men associated with the family. This led investigators to Keith Johnston, Louise's ex-partner. Although he didn't live with Louise, he saw her often. Investigators learned that shortly before the incident, Keith and Kieran went shopping together at a home improvement store. Security cameras showed them buying saws, strong bags, chemical cleaners, and gloves. Authorities realized these items were purchased after Patricia's estimated time of death. This suggested the dismemberment was not a panicked response, but a planned attempt to cover up the crime. The evidence pointed to a deliberate plan to conceal the murder, rather than a desperate reaction. Following an anonymous tip, investigators searched a site near the Glen MacNass waterfall, where the body might have been disposed of. A specialized team found 2 electric saws and an axe. Forensic analysis confirmed these tools were used to dismember the body. Bone particles matching Patricia's remains were discovered on one of the saw blades. All household members were re-interviewed. Louise's story changed significantly. Previously, she claimed Patricia left on her own. Now, she admitted she only believed Kieran's version of events and didn't know the whole truth. Meanwhile, Patricia's son, Richard, gave a different account. He told investigators that Patricia never left the house on the day she disappeared. He also said the suitcase used to make it look like she left was later found in his father's bedroom. Richard's statement was important because he was the only family member not involved in hiding the truth. He confirmed that Louise tried to stop him from contacting the police, claiming Patricia wanted to leave. This made investigators believe that more than one person was involved in covering up the crime. Law enforcement documented all 9 locations where remains had been discovered, officially designating them as crime scenes. Along with the house, police identified forested areas, the original burial site, and the roadside locations where parts of the body had been scattered. A full picture emerged: a crime followed by dismemberment, transportation, a staged disappearance, and a mutual agreement to stay silent. On the 14th of January, 2020, the trial over Patricia O'Connor's death began in Dublin. 5 individuals faced charges: Kieran Green, Louise O'Connor, Stefania O'Connor, Keith Johnston, and Augustine O'Connor. Each was accused of varying degrees of involvement, from committing the act to helping cover it up and interfering with the investigation. The judge warned that the case would be lengthy and complex. Given the volume of evidence, the prosecution argued that Patricia was murdered in her home on the night of May 29, 2017. They claimed Kieran fatally struck her in the head multiple times. Afterwards, the body was hidden, dismembered, and moved to remote locations. Kieran, who had previously confessed to the crime, now claimed he was innocent at the trial. He said he only confessed because his family asked him to take the blame. He accused Augustine of being the real killer, claiming Augustine and Patricia argued intensely, and Augustine hit her with a crowbar. Kieran stated that Louise convinced him to confess in return for her help after the incident. This change was unexpected, since Kieran had maintained his original confession for over 2 years. The prosecution presented video evidence showing Kieran and Keith buying saws, strong bags, and other supplies. They also showed video of the vehicle used to move Patricia's body. Separate medical reports confirmed she suffered several blows to the head and was dismembered with power tools. This evidence contradicts the claim that Patricia died from an accidental fall. Keith claimed he was unaware of the tool's purpose. The defense questioned the accuracy of the surveillance video, but the court dismissed their concerns. The defendants also tried to blame each other. Kieran accused Augustine, Louise, and Keith. Louise accused Kieran. Stephanie said she was only following her mother's orders. Augustine stated that he trusted his daughter's word. The prosecution argued that the family worked together to hide the truth and cover up the crime. Witnesses testified that everyone in the family knew Patricia was dead, but chose to keep it a secret, even lying to investigators. The evidence suggests the family didn't just panic. They intentionally collaborated to conceal a terrible crime. Patricia O'Connor's funeral was held privately, with no public announcement. Only a few family members were invited, and her sisters were not informed. Other relatives learned about the burial through news reports after it had already happened. Former colleagues, neighbors, and longtime friends were also excluded. The official reason for the private ceremony was to maintain peace. However, it became apparent that the secrecy was part of an ongoing attempt to erase Patricia's memory. The exclusion of close relatives highlighted a severe family rift and suggested that certain individuals were still trying to avoid public attention even after the trial. On January 15, 2020, Kieran Green went on trial for the murder of Patricia O'Connor. On February 25, 2020, he was convicted of murdering Patricia by beating her in the bathroom of their home. On February 26, 2020, Stephanie O'Connor was convicted of hindering the apprehension or prosecution of Kieran Green, knowing or believing that he had murdered Patricia on May 29, 2017. The jury accepted the prosecution's case that she had disguised herself as her grandmother on May 29, 2017 to conceal Patricia O'Connor's death. On February 27, 2020, Louise O'Connor was convicted of hindering the apprehension or prosecution of Kieran Green, knowing or believing that he had murdered her mother, Patricia O'Connor. Her sentence also reflected the pressure she exerted on other family members, including attempts to prevent her brother from going to the police. Louise denied the charges, but her explanations failed to withstand scrutiny in the face of the evidence. On 28 February 2020, Keith Johnston was found guilty of hindering the apprehension or prosecution of Kieran Green, knowing or believing that he had murdered Patricia O'Connor. He denied assisting Kieran in purchasing DIY tools from Woody's, Mr. Price, B&Q, and Shoe Zone. Tallied on 9 June 2017. The jury accepted the prosecution's allegation that Johnston knew or suspected that the tools were to be used to dismember O'Connor. Johnston was the former partner of Louise O'Connor and the father of her 2 children, including Stephanie O'Connor. While the court found no evidence that he participated in the crime, it concluded that he actively contributed to the concealment of the crime. Augustine O'Connor confessed to hiding information from the police before his trial started. He admitted he knew Patricia was missing, but helped spread the false story that she had left voluntarily. The court concluded that the actions of all convicted individuals were focused not on seeking help but on concealing the crime. Despite the varying levels of involvement, every adult in the household contributed to the deception in the collective attempt to avoid accountability. In June 2020, Kieran Green was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Patricia O'Connor. Stephanie O'Connor was sentenced to 18 months in prison, and her mother, Louise, was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Keith Johnston was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Augustine O'Connor, who pleaded guilty to reporting his wife missing despite knowing she was dead, was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Because of his age and some help Augustine gave to the authorities, The court decided he could apply for parole after 1 year. The individuals served different amounts of time compared to their original sentences. Stephanie was released after 8 months and then avoided all public attention. Augustin served about 13 months before being released. Louise was freed in May 2022 after serving nearly 2 years and received housing assistance from a government program. Keith was released in September 2022 and was photographed by the media. He appeared unconcerned. Kieran Green is the only one still in prison, serving his full sentence in a high-security facility. He is unlikely to be released before 2040. After Augustin O'Connor was released, he inherited Patricia's house and her bank accounts. He then sold the house for a large profit. Patricia's daughter, Louise, received nothing from the inheritance and wasn't even mentioned in Patricia's death notice. Richard said that their father, Augustine, blamed Louise for emotional abuse and deliberately left her out of the will. Augustine died in 2022 without ever reconciling with Louise or his grandchildren. His actions showed he had permanently cut them out of his life. After being released, Keith Johnston mostly avoided public attention. Paparazzi photos showed him looking calm, without any indication of regret or emotional distress. Many people felt that he and the others involved received punishments that were too light. Considering the seriousness of what they did, no public memorial was ever held for Patricia. Her name did not appear in local records or community tributes. Those who had known her remembered her as someone who dedicated her life to caring for others, only to have it end in betrayal and isolation. Though the court issued sentences, the story leaves a haunting question unanswered. None of those convicted ever fully explained why harming Patricia seemed justifiable to them. The most disturbing element of this case remains unresolved. How could the family she had devoted her life to turn against her in such a devastating way